Good evening. Tonight is May 27th. This is a regular Board of Education meeting. I'd like to make a call to order for the meeting. And tonight, Ms. McCammon will be here shortly, but we're going to skip the chair report for now and go straight to public comment.
Good evening. If anyone in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the time with the chair. We do not have any raised hands at this time.
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for getting us started. That's totally fine. Superintendent's report. Just go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I want to thank the members of the community that attended last week's Stop Hate Together event hosted by the town. Please know that your presence was very much appreciated and your partnership matter and make a difference. So thank you. Just want to recognize our students over here, particularly Brenna, who received quite a few accolades on the senior scholarship and award ceremony. It was wonderful to see the very best of our school district on display, and also a huge thank you to the generosity of our town organizations for the many thousands of dollars that they give out in scholarships. It's just a wonderful tribute to Darien Public Schools and the excellence that we are known for. So thank you, and well done, Brenna. Congratulations to you. I know your internship underway, so I'll let you talk to those. Good luck to our DHS Unified team. I think they are playing a spring tournament tomorrow at Fairfield Ludlow High School. All the field days and recognition ceremonies are underway, field days especially. Thank you to members of our CDSP, PTOs, musical organizations, musical parent organizations, everything that has been going on and continues to go on. It's just wonderful to just to see the excellence on display, our kids so engaged, and our staff and our parent community. So thank you for that. The arts, just to show the art show at the middle school is going on tour to the Darien Nature Center. So it will be there most of the summer. So if you get a chance to swing by there, you can see that. ESY schedules have been sent out. The transportation, actually, if you have any transportation questions, but many people here can answer them tonight. Transportation updates will be communicated this year, I believe, by the drivers with personal contact with phone calls home. So look forward to that. Registration for the summer school enrichment programs is presently open. The summer school and extended year programs will commence on June 30th and run to July 25th. Then we have a couple of weeks of bridge programming. Just upcoming meetings. The Facilities Committee on Friday the 30th. The administration is suggesting that, recommended that we defer that. Certainly the board can comment on it, but the Ox Ridge curb cut, the food waste recommendation, the food waste recycling program, and the transportation. Transportation is here this evening. There was an executive session discussion prior on the Ox Ridge curb cut, and the food waste program is underway. Processes are taking place, but there's just not enough to bring to the table. July 26th is when we need to be doing something by. The facilities and Amy are working on met with members of the community and also some of our vendors. So when that's ready, they can bring it forward. But it would be the recommendation that we reconvene again in the fall. But that's up for the board and the subcommittee to make that decision. The meetings are, as have been communicated, curriculum committee meeting on June 4th. Next regular meeting June 10th, and the finance subcommittee meeting on June 19th.
Great. Approval of student representative reports. Brenna and Ryan.
Good evening, everyone. Our seniors are officially into our second week of our internships. I hope that everyone's going swimmingly and hopefully not missing classes too much, as well as coming right out of AP exam season. We hope everything is going smoothly for all of our I guess, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors who just recently went through those grueling exams. Theater 308 just had our, I think, largest student productions yet to date. I think we had 11 shows, some of which were written, but all of which were directed and produced by the students. So hats off to everyone. Some great moments and performances there. And we continue to be moving through the last few days of our calendar.
Yeah, just building off what Brenna said, many of our students begin their finals next Friday, which is insane to say. Our junior prom is next Saturday, May 31st. So hoping to see a lot of people there. And tonight, our girls and boys lacrosse teams both have their FCAC matches, along with our boys baseball, girls softball, and girls golf. So hoping for some great things from them, as always, but not too worried. We got some great teams out there.
Thank you, guys. Fun to hear. Approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the special and regular meetings held on May 13th, 2025? That's Robin, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor? That's unanimous. And we have,
So there's one quick, John was here for a vote that I didn't record, so.
Okay.
Okay,
as amended.
as amended, thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
I approve.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, board committee reports. John?
Trying to figure out which date we met. May 15th, the board of, the finance committee met. We discussed the surplus, non-lapsing account. The consensus was for the superintendent to come with some recommendations from him and his cabinet. And we'll talk about that later.
Nope. Okay. With that, we'll move on to presentations, discussions, and possible action. We'll start with an update on transportation.
So just to start with a brief overview, we've had a relationship with First Student, who is the district's home to school provider for over 25 years. We do have 25 home to school buses. Previously, we did use a mixture of First Student and some out-of-district vendors for in-house special education transportation. This year, as you know, as part of the budget process, we did bring that all in-house, and we operate a fleet of 15 vehicles for both in and out-of-district. We typically talk about the tiers. We do have a 3-tier system: the high school, the middle school, and then early and late elementary. And then just as a reminder, we have our transportation policy, which guides who receives transportation. So we have our director of transportation here, Ms. Danny Powers. A lot of people probably know her, but I might not ever get to see her. She does do a great job, and this is just a list of her team. She has 15 drivers who do a fantastic job, as well as Mr. Terry Fogel, who is the assistant.
I was her assistant principal, just for the record.
For transportation, we have talked a lot about costs for transportation. You can see the home to school transportation, which are those 25 buses, will grow by about $1 million over the next 4 years. And that's really driven by the driver shortage throughout the state, increases in wages paid to drivers, and benefit costs to drivers as well. And then you can see the in-house versus the contracted cost for special education transportation. And so next year we will, with this model, save about 1.1 million. We have the district and the town has committed about $1.18 million in vehicle acquisition costs, whether it be the Suburbans, the Sprinter vans, or the Type 2s, or the wheelchair vans. And so the town, including from fiscal 25 through 26, will see their investment returned in full by the end of next school year. So it's a 2-year payback, which is a little bit ahead of schedule, and that's largely due to some of our drivers didn't receive benefits. We did end up getting 3 Sprinter vans as opposed to 5 Type 2 vans when that initial calculation was done. So the payback was about a 2-year payback. Oops. We did want to just highlight that all our drivers do get training. There we go. All our drivers have to have an endorsement, whether it's an S, a P, or a V. They all get classroom training, supervised training, and then a slew of other training, whether it's mandated reporting. They get some special education training, emergency evacuation, student management, bullying, and other items like that. If we look at ridership, we have a population of 4,600 people. 4,600 students, about 3,300 are eligible, and that's based on the Board of Ed policy with the walk radius. and typically about 61% of that 3,300 actually take the bus on any given day. So we are transporting about 2,000 students every single day. Ridership ranges from a low of 183 at Royal to a high at Middlesex at 527. We do typically see, as most districts, that middle school does tend to see the greatest volume. They're obviously the kids who can't drive yet. They're also the kids who probably tend not to want to be driven by their parents, like in elementary school. So you do tend to see higher ridership at a middle school compared to an elementary or a high school. Home to school. So starting next year, the district is starting their transition to propane buses. So the Connecticut Clean Air Act does require that school districts either transition to propane or electric buses by 2030. And so we are implementing a phase in of 5 buses a year for the next 5 years in order to get to that. We went with propane for a couple of reasons. One, the bus depot in Stamford does not have the infrastructure for electric buses. Electric buses are also more costly. And so propane buses are used in a couple districts in this area, including New Canaan and Norwalk, and the fuel cost for propane is less expensive than electricity. We do typically try to publish routes about a week before school starts. It does take a while to get all the routes together. As you can see, we typically try to keep the students on the bus for an average of about 30 minutes per bus. We have a certain amount of time in between tiers, which also determines how many kids we can actually have on a bus. There's 45 minutes for the middle school and the high school, and about 35 minutes at each elementary school. So a lot of times we're asked if, a parent might see a bus go by and say, well, the bus can hold 70 kids. I only usually see maybe 30 or 40 kids on the bus. Could you collapse a bus? And the reason we can't really do that is the time it takes in between the tiers to get the students to school. So if we were to collapse a bus at each school, all the buses would run late, essentially. You have to think about how long it takes the kid to get on the bus, especially at the lower grades, at the elementary grades. It's not a very quick process. It takes a while for the kid to get on the bus. They like to say hi to their friends and they got to sit. So it does take a while, and you can see the number of buses that we have here. Oxford, obviously being the largest elementary school, has the most buses at 12 for the elementaries. Royal and Holmes are down at 7. And then again, the middle school has the most buses at 16. And again, that is a product of ridership. Just as a refresher, we did bring in school bus logistics a few years ago to look at the walk radius. That was a study that's done. And we've used an external router, Lance Osler, to review the efficiency of our routes just to make sure that we're operating as efficiently as possible. There's been discussion about train tracks. This is obviously a commuter town, and so there are a number of train tracks in the area. We do cross 4 areas throughout town: Hoyt Street, Cam Street, Talmadge Hill Road, and Glenbrook Road. The district, through the superintendent, has requested the first selectman through WestCog to start looking at a study to see if there's any ways that can be improved, safety improvements in the areas. All drivers are trained on proper railroad safety crossings to ensure that they're doing their procedures correctly. Community responsiveness, just as a reminder for the community, the chain of communication starts with Ms. Powers, and then it would move up to myself and the superintendent. We have tried to be as responsive as we can, considering some of the conditions that are in place. A few years ago, the board did add bus 25, which helps support some of those high school walk radius students in that Fitch Avenue area. We do always try to make sure that students are not crossing main roads. Sometimes we will get emails from parents where they think their students crossing the road, but sometimes you have buses going in opposite direction, and it's an instance where a student might be getting on the wrong bus, but we never really want a student to cross a main road. And then if we can, and it's optional, we will try to adjust drop-off and pick-up spots when feasible, as long as it doesn't disturb the whole route. I know we've talked a lot about a bus depot. This is actually a picture of the bus depot in Stanford that First Student rents. A bus depot would need room for about 30 full-size buses. While we have 25, we do have spare buses. So if the bus breaks down, you do have to have a spare bus. You need parking for the bus drivers. You need parking for mechanics. You need parking for the location manager, dispatch, safety manager. The site in Stanford is about a 2-acre site. So you would probably need between a 1.5 and a 2-acre site to make a bus depot. We talked about this a little bit, but having a bus depot is not something that could be done during the budget season. If we were to just magically get a bus depot tomorrow, First Student's not going to just take their buses and move them to a new depot and then credit us an amount. They have a lease for this facility that they are paying on. And so Effectively, you would have to break the contract with First Student, you would have to go out to bid, you would have to get a new bus company, and that bus company would have to get buses, they'd have to get drivers, they'd have to get a location manager, the whole slew of staff that goes along with running a bus company, and that obviously takes time. So that's not something that could happen in a period of a couple months. It would take a while between actually acquiring a site and staffing up a site. If the town wanted to look at a bus depot, the best option would be to try to time that with an expiration of a contract as opposed to breaking the contract mid-year. Special education transportation, as I mentioned earlier, we did transition to an in-house fleet of buses. We have 8 Suburbans that support both in-district and out-of-district. We have 2 Type 2 buses, 2 wheelchair vans, and 3 Sprinter vans. As I mentioned before, we have 15 drivers, 9 monitors, and we support about 128 students. And as shown earlier, it saved in excess of $1 million. These are just pictures of what our vehicles look like. You can see the Sprinter vans and the Suburbans, the wheelchair vans, and the Type 2 buses. ESY, Dr. Adley mentioned before, it does take about 3 or 4 weeks to get the routing down. We do transport about 120 students in district along with about 20 or so out of district students. We do have 10 vehicles servicing in district students, and we have 12 out of district locations as well. Magnet schools, we have about 15 students with 10 magnet schools, whether it's the Center for Global Studies, Rogers International, or the Academy of Information Technology and Engineering. The district does not currently provide transportation for magnet school students. Athletic transportation, we do have Mr. Manfredonia on Zoom as well. You can see in the chart below, we do try to operate as efficiently as possible, but again, athletic transportation, just like home to school transportation, is a growing financial cost due to the cost of drivers and driver shortages. We do spend the lowest amount per student, but you can see everybody's kind of in that same ballpark of 190 to 220. The biggest challenges we have is First Student only provides 3 buses in the afternoons, and you can have as many as 13 athletic competitions happening at once. It's not viable for First Student to increase that number from 3 or more. When we had contract negotiations, we were trying to push them as high as we can go. Anything above 3, they were willing to just walk away from the district entirely. The problem is that school gets out at 2:30. They need those drivers also to pick up the middle school kids, the elementary kids. Having a driver just kind of on standby to do a route for athletics is not really cost effective for them. And so when we can't get a First Student bus, we do get charter buses or coach buses. Ways we've created efficiencies. We do use the home to school buses for in-town facility drop-offs, whether it's the Y, Weed Beach, or Cherry Lawn. We have combined teams on buses when traveling to the same towns, if that's an option. So smaller teams like baseball, basketball, volleyball, tennis, things like that. And then on occasions, you do have parents who drive their students to smaller trips as well.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. Yes.
Could I just ask just a wee quick comment on, we restructured a little bit some of the, the organization, how that sort of, I hadn't asked this before. I just wanted to make, just for the board's perspective, because we did a wee bit of restructure for productivity and responsiveness and so on.
Sure. So it starts with Danny. She's the Director of Transportation. She has Terry, who's her assistant, and Terry focuses primarily on the in-district and out-of-district special ed transportation. And so they're really a team that kind of goes back and forth. Danny handles the predominant amount of any issues we have or concerns from parents about home to school transportation, but also with special education transportation. And then they're also in charge of the 15 drivers. And so as we said during the budget season, it is running like a mini bus company. We're running 15 buses every day. It's about 212 days, including ESY. So the idea is the first point of contact for the community would be Danny or Terry. And then obviously, depending on the outcome, it could always get escalated to myself or Dr. Ed.
Okay. I think because this is such a broad-based topic, maybe we can sort of take it set of questions by set of questions. So maybe staying on this question of the restructure, does anybody want any more information about community responsiveness, how the restructure works, financial side of it? Anything on the restructure? Go ahead.
I think this would go under community responsiveness.
So not to be too strict.
So this year, I believe it was an opt-out Or everybody, like, last year, was what is it?
So previously, so starting in COVID, we instituted an opt-in
Okay.
policy, and that was largely because we had to know who was on the buses. So we actually had to track who was sitting on the buses, around where they were sitting on the buses. This school year, we eliminated the opt-in, opt-out. The reason we eliminated the opt-in, opt-out is most parents just didn't actually remember to opt in. And so what would end up happening is a couple days before school, we would get frantic phone calls, emails from parents saying, I didn't opt in my kid, I need transportation. And you literally couldn't get back to the people in time because your inbox would be full. You couldn't get them back in time. It created a lot of angst and concern in the community. It wasn't done for like efficiencies or cost savings. And in the time in which we did it from COVID until we eliminated it, it didn't result in any elimination of buses. It didn't eliminate any reduction in cost. It really simply started as a process of having to know who was on the buses. And because of the issues with parents not being able to, give their information or forgetting to give their information, the concern amongst a lot of parents who called was, oh my God, my kid's not going to be able to get to school now. I have to work. How am I going to get my kid to school? Danny was working probably till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning trying to get back to parents. And typically what would happen is her email box would be so full, by the time she got back, they've already sent 2 more emails saying, I haven't heard back from you. And so just operationally, it worked better without having to have it.
And there was no cost difference
There
between.
was not, no.
Other questions related to this area? Okay.
I have one financials. So Rich, you look at that slide with transportation costs over the 3 years, there's a significant increase, like 10% a year. Talk a little bit about the dilemma where we sit in, given that we don't own a property for a bus depot.
So in the area, there's probably about 4 primary vendors for transportation. There's First Student, there's SDA, which is in Wilton, there's Durham in Norwalk, and there's All Star Transportation, which is a little further up. So every year the districts put it out to bid. There is no interest in actually submitting a bid other than First Student. So DATCO is another one I didn't mention, but they're in New Canaan. DATCO has explicitly told us they're not going to bid because they don't have anywhere to park their buses. STA has said the same thing. You don't have anywhere to park your buses. We're not really interested in bidding. And so what ends up happening is you submit an RFP and you have 1 bidder. We are obligated to provide transportation. So you have a marketplace of 1 and nowhere else to kind of go to. One of the reasons the special education transportation model works so well is we created our own market so that we could essentially outbid for a student or outbid some of these smaller companies that did some of the out of districts. We don't really have that as an option with home to school transportation. So you're kind of stuck getting who you get, and First Student does a very good job, but it also doesn't create an incentive for them to sharpen their pencils. And, when like New Canaan goes out to bid, they had DATCO, they had First Student, they had SDA, same thing with Westport. And so we just don't have that option available to us.
And just one follow-up, given there's a lot of variables going into this question, so it might not be unanswerable. But if it was a competitive bidding process, could you estimate the difference that we'd see in this transportation cost forecast versus?
Obviously it would depend on the wages for everybody else. We did ask when we put out to bid how much First Student was paying for their lease in Stamford, and it was $500,000. So
A year.
yeah, so one would assume that you are going to get something in that ballpark if you were able to park the buses. Now, that's not free. Either you're going to have to find a space in town and rent it out, and you're going to have to factor in whatever that rent would be. The town would have to buy a piece of property and, rezone it and maybe do some investment into the property. So it's not a free and clear $500,000, but it's about $500,000 a year that they're paying to have those bays there and the ability to park and transport. I'm sure that if we had a depot, we would get more than just First Student that would bid. Whether or not, a DATCO or an SDA would come in that low would be interesting.
Staying on finances and I guess the depot.
Yeah, so I guess building on the depot question, what has the conversation been with the other town bodies about this process? And is there any interest from the other town bodies about pursuing this?
They're aware that there's a need. Steve Mulvaney, I know, is constantly scanning for it to see if he can find a spot. I think I think we would have the support of town bodies if and when we're ready to actually do it, but I think we would need to figure out what the timing is, and be a little more committed beyond just we think it's a good idea.
So a lot of what you get in other communities, bus depots are loud and they're loud at a time most people don't want it to be loud.
Yeah.
The buses are starting to gear up at 6 o'clock in the morning and, the buses aren't quiet. Just in the lot in Stamford, we hear the complaints from the neighbors in town saying how awful it is to hear the buses, rolling out at 6 o'clock and all the activity that goes on. So you have to, realize that could be an issue if it's in a residential area. And again, the timing is what's important. So when we put out to bid the contract here, we had results in like November, which was the one bid that we got from First Student. So you would really need to know what direction you're going prior to even pushing out a budget. Because if, let's say, you were going to have a depot, you would want to know in November that you could offer, actually in October, when you're writing the bid and sending it out, that, okay, we're going to have a place for your bus company to park, work on the buses, et cetera. And then you're looking to award before you've even really gone knee deep into the budget process and gotten approval.
So based on the current contract, can you outline what your ideal timeline would be?
So we are in year 1 of 5
Right.
for the contract. So you have 4 more years to go.
Mhm.
So if you were really interested in, considering a depot, you're really looking at 4 years out in that last year of that contract. And so if that year started in July 1st, really trying to hone in and get a decision on a site by probably September, October, so that when that bid goes out and you're getting bid responses back, within that bid, it says, our bus depot is at X, Y, and Z address. You'll be able to provide, parking for your staff and the buses, et cetera. And then we would have results in like November, December timeframe to make a decision on who to award.
But again, running through the financials in my head right off the bat, we're talking about $500,000 a year savings, give or take,
Right.
plus a competitive bidding process that could yield even larger savings.
Looking at other fellow towns that have bus depots, how do we compare cost per student? Do you know?
So we are higher. So we are higher than Westport. We are higher than New Canaan and Weston as well. Some of that has to do with, the number of buses that you have, the wages and whether or not. So some locations don't offer benefits to drivers. Darien does offer benefits to drivers, and that's an ability to attract drivers. So we're not sitting in a situation where we have a driver shortage. So there's been a lot of districts, especially in the last couple of years, that have had to send out messages to parents. I know in Newtown, as an example, it said, sorry, we can't pick up your kids today. We have no bus driver. Parents, you have to drive your kids to school. And so that's, an effort to kind of avoid that. But we are kind of near the top end. Us and I think Greenwich are kind of high.
Okay. Any other questions on this topic? Go ahead.
So if we had a depot, could we have more than the 3 buses and maybe alleviate some of the athletics, or maybe make our walk radius a little smaller?
So the choice of a walk radius isn't really whether you have a depot or not. It's whether or not you want to put money into buses. So if you were to reduce the walk radius to, pick a number, you need more buses, right? And so the Stamford lot can certainly accommodate more buses, but you have to pay for the bus, right? So every bus is about $110,000. The more than 3 buses for athletics is not something that's going to change whether you have a depot or not. Again, it's not really a money maker for First Student to have a driver who's only available at, let's say, that 2:30 timeframe to drive. What they really want is that driver be able to do all 3 packages, which means, the high school run, the middle school run, the elementary runs. Most districts across the state have kind of struggled with not having available drivers for athletics.
Before COVID, were there more drivers for athletics?
So you weren't really getting more than 3 or 4 for the most part. What we saw in previous years prior to this year. So this year we have a 3 driver guarantee. And so what that means is they have to provide us 3 drivers. If they fail to provide us 3 drivers, we can fine them. In the past, what it would be is we're aiming for 3 drivers, but this year, sorry, we can only get you 1 driver. You're kind of on your own for the other 2. And so you kind of fill that gap with whether it's like charter buses, coach buses, things like that. So we built into the contract, kind of have that hard and fast 3 driver guarantee.
Dennis?
We go to athletic, it's kind of a cost question, I think. parents driving students for trips with smaller student participations, does that happen in the other towns which you reference as well?
I don't know if Chris is, I believe it does. I don't know if Chris is on and wants to speak to it.
I'm here, Rich. I had the question. Can you hear me though? I'm at a lacrosse game.
We can
Can
hear
you
you.
hear me? So to answer the question, hopefully you can hear me. Yes, it does happen in other towns as well. Smaller teams will, have parents drive versus, getting an entire bus.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on cost for bus depot? Katie?
Thank you. I just want to say that, thank you for the presentation and for the conversation. I think that this is, a big driver of the budget, and, I appreciate the timeline that you laid out especially, but I do want to just implore the board to keep this top of mind and to, be cognizant of the timing and the conversations that we need to have with other town bodies, because it really is material money. And if we can, find $500,000 that we can put back into student programming over busing, I'm all for that. I am curious just about the slides, and I might be missing something here in terms of first student providing the drivers, but then we also have drivers and we offer them benefits. I'm curious what has been done in terms of recruiting drivers, specifically, evening drivers. I mean, I can still remember Don Johnson, the cutest, old retired guy who drove my volleyball bus in all of high school. Is that something that we have an ability to kind of, recruit for ourselves?
So we recruit for the 15 drivers that we have for special education. Danny's done a great job of, to be honest, poaching a lot of first student drivers that have built our team. So first student on their side does offer bonuses. They offer perfect attendance awards, things like that. But they are also a unionized group. They're part of the Teamsters, right? And so there's only so much that they can do within the confines of their contract. It's not as if they can sit there and say, we'll pay you extra if you're willing to do a couple more routes. That all has to be collectively bargained on their end as well. And again, with athletics as an example, that's happening at the same time that you have the primary drivers doing the home to school drivers. And so what you need effectively is extra drivers that are not doing those routes to be able to do those athletic.
Right. Sorry, I don't think I was clear. If we had our own buses, would we then be able to recruit our own drivers to drive in
Sure.
the evenings as well?
If they were willing to, yeah, sure.
But do you mean that we would purchase buses in addition to the depot? Is that what you mean?
I'm not really outlining a plan. I'm just trying to understand where some of the constraints are and how we might think about them going
Okay.
forward, what
I mean, the
might
one-
be a barrier versus what might be.
The one thing I would just say is, if you were to look at our 15 drivers, and if we were to say, you're driving 8 hours during the day, would you, work, at night to maybe do, let's say, an athletic run? So the only thing that comes into play is now you have to pay them overtime, because obviously it's over 40 hours a week. And so obviously a time and a half or double time, depending on what it is, it does change the financial equation.
I appreciate that consideration. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, and just following up though, the town, there's not a recommendation, or do other towns buy their buses also?
So there's only one.
I'm talking about the big buses. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about the small.
So there's only one district that I know of that does it. I believe it's Glastonbury, that does it, and they run their own fleet. It's a big proposition to do. It's not you're liable for everything. You're liable for all the records. It's not just getting the drivers, because then you have to have maintenance mechanics on staff. It's not typically something that you would want to really get into. Buying the 72 passenger buses. It also takes a good 12 to 15 months to actually get a bus, right? And then the other thing you're gonna have to consider is you're gonna have to buy extra buses more than that you use, because if the bus goes down, it's not like you can just go borrow another bus. Whereas right now, if let's say one of our buses goes down, it's not uncommon, or let's say we're down a driver, if the first student say, okay, well, Stanford, we're gonna borrow a bus from you for the day and a driver from you for the day. And kind of shuffle that account around, because they have those economies of scale, whereas you wouldn't have that.
So it's very uncommon.
It's very uncommon.
Okay, thank you.
Probably more common up around Hartford area.
Joanna?
With the idea of the bus depot, but hiring first student or whomever to have the buses, what about, do they also pay for the mechanic or the person who sits at the?
Yep. So First student has an on-site location manager, an on-site dispatcher who are first student employees. They have safety team manager, who is a first student employee. They have mechanics who are first student employees, drivers, et cetera.
So would that come with the contract with them as well, or would we need to hire that separately?
No, so if you were to have like a bus depot, it would be similar, like let's say like what Westport has. Westport has their own location manager, but they're first student employees. They just sit at the location that's provided by the district.
Then,
Going back to the depot discussion, we've always talked about housing it in Darien. Is there anything precluding us from leasing land in neighboring towns?
So, no, but you'd likely have to have the town do it because, you have a non-appropriation clause, right? So technically the town could not appropriate you money, but you still have this lease. So I know when I worked in a previous district, we had an issue of not having a bus depot in town. And we actually ended up working with the town, for the town to, enter into an agreement to take property. And then they took the property and they billed us back essentially the cost of that depot so that we could get the depot. If the town even wanted to potentially maybe buy a piece of property in the neighboring community, they would obviously have to be the taxpayer to that town if they own the property. But there's nothing to say that the town couldn't lease or maybe purchase a property outside of its boundaries. I would imagine that they would want to go through their council to make sure that everything's, okay. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't have a piece of property in Norwalk or Stamford, for example.
Thank you.
Just one final question. Can you just give a quick comparison when we are able to use one of those 3 first student buses for an athletic event versus a coach bus? Like, what are we talking per instance?
In terms of like the cost or, it's, it's probably a good 30 to 40% more to use a coach bus.
So.
It's dependent on where the trip is going to, quite honestly. Obviously, a longer, further away trip is going to cost more and be a bigger differential than what a trip that's closer by would be.
So those 3 buses with for student, like we're paying those per transaction, per transport as well for athletics. It's not part of like a contract.
No,
whatever our schedule
you're paying
is,
an extra.
they're counted out.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
so I think I'm not want to finish the total discussion, but in terms of the bus depot, it would be helpful to document some of this in a memo that I could formally send over, please, to the P&Z, the Board of Selectmen. I'll copy the Board of Finance so they're just aware. So that everybody has the same set of information, please.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth pursuing in the next 4 years or even, starting the ball rolling because we know we do have some time, but not a ton of time. So, yeah.
There was talk about doing a capital prioritization kind of list town-wide.
Yeah.
Where does that stand? Do you know?
No, I don't know exactly where it stands. Good question. I know that John was aware of the depot as a discussion. But I'm not sure it's on there.
Okay.
I can check that too.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
There was talk of food pass and so on, so you would want everything to probably coordinate with that too, if
sidewalks,
you were,
yeah.
yes, if you were doing something.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, which there is a sidewalk study. I have asked John, I'll ask him again to just brief us on the sidewalks, because I know he's looking at some of the areas around the schools also. So we're aware of the scope of that. Okay, anything else on bus depot? Yes, Katie?
Well, I just wanted to talk about ridership.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I have a couple of questions about ridership. First, especially if we're updating with a few of the information and the questions, I'd love to see the total student population next to the slide where you have the school's ridership, because I think it would be helpful to paint that full picture of not just who's eligible and then who's using, but also like what percentage of our full population is actually making use of the bus. Additionally, I'm really curious about the intersectionality of some of our busing issues. For example, I'd be really interested to know about tardiness rates at the high school in particular. I think a lot of people can probably attest from personal experience that, the minute that you get to that loop changes dramatically with how long of a line you're in. And, with buses and, with the fact that I think probably I'll speak from my own experience, a lot of people are driving students because the high school starts very early and they don't want their kids to get on the bus, at 6 a.m. So how many kids are tardy because of, the traffic, because of the earliness of the bus route, all of those kind of things? I think it would really benefit us to look at this from multiple angles of how it impacts our students and, the way that our buildings run. I'm also a little curious just about general, how does our ridership compare to the other districts as well too? Like, are we within the same range? Are we low? And then one last question on ridership is the determination of the routes and the stops and I know you had like the slide on collapsing. Is that all coming from First Student? Is that coming from?
No. So we use a program called Versatrans. And so we don't use First Student for our routing. We do our routing ourselves with the help of a consultant named Lance Osler. But there are some districts that will contract with, let's say, First Student. They have something called First Planning, which will do the routing, but all of it's done through Versatrans.
So sorry, you have a consultant and then you also have Versatrans. That's the program that you use?
Correct.
Okay.
There were a couple questions in there. Is there anything that you have answers to off the top of your head?
I do not know about the tardiness, and I'd have to really kind of dig into what other districts do for ridership. I would imagine the breakdown, and we can check in terms of like usage of the buses. Like I said earlier, most districts do tend to see middle school kids use the buses more. Again, the older you get, you don't want to go in with your mom and dad to school, and the older you get, maybe you can drive, and so maybe you're going in with your friends or you're driving yourself, and so it's not unusual to see lower usage at the high school. But I would have to check really about some of the elementaries.
Can I just for clarification? So it's probably easy for us to track how many buses are late or whatever, right? That's easy. But the other one about arriving in the circle, like how do we get to?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think it would be beneficial to pay attention to. Again, using my own example, I know that the high school certainly tracks a certain number of tardies, that gets you sent to an admin and another. So, in those instances, when maybe you're on your second admin meeting for being late to school, I think that could be an interesting question. Is this a bus issue? Is this a loop issue? Is this I can't wake up in time issue? I think that those things would help us better understand our population, and then also, what maybe is within our control.
Brenna's again.
What's that?
Brenna.
Brennan?
So if we want to look into the tardiness issue, I think that there would be some value to holding those attendance meetings, specifically those about people who were consistently tardy. But I'm not sure about, because what happens is the buses have their own special entrance, so they're not always waiting in line with all the cars. So I think it would be challenging to specifically pinpoint the buses in the DHS loop, because oftentimes even just for the regular traffic, even for the pedestrians and the cyclists, it extends far beyond that one-way road that goes into the high school. I was a bus rider and I was late many times because my bus was late. And the one thing that I had sort of picked up was that these poor drivers have a set time that they have to be at every house. And a lot of the times those set times are illogical, because if you're leaving a house, let's say on Fitch at 7:29, there's no way that you're going to get to the high school on time. So, it's not fair to anybody, because the students wind up with the 7 or 8 tardies or whatever it is. And then the drivers are getting angry emails from parents, and then and the teachers are saying, why is everybody coming late to class? So it's a negative feedback loop for sure, but it's also maybe we just need to re-examine what time, because there's nothing that the drivers can do. They have to be, and they're as flexible as they can be, but it really is something I think more so on the administrative level, examining do all these times make sense? Do we really need 15 minutes to get 0.5 miles away, especially at 7 in the morning when there's maybe not going to be as many cars on the road as there would be at 7:30. There also have been like instances where I know like buses have literally had to like pull over on the side of the road, especially earlier in their route because they were running too early. It's that timing thing is tricky, and everybody deserves a grace period of however many weeks it is, but I think we could, if possible, amp up the evaluative work that we're doing in that period to really make sure that everything makes sense and everything is what it ought to be, I think.
Danny, is there-
Go ahead, Danny. Yep.
I just wanted to speak on tardy.
come up to the microphone, please.
Our students are not marked tardy. I have GPS on all first student vehicles and on our vehicles. If they get to the school late, we notify Ellen, they'll mark them. It's no fault of the students. But what we run into in the high school is the high schoolers like to park and the buses are trapped and can't get into the bus. So I've had a couple of issues that we work on, but I do have a program where I ask parents for first view where they could track the bus and I have the ability to see what the arrival time was for each school. Okay?
Thank you, Danny. And I just want to clarify that when I was asking about the tardies, I really wasn't blaming the bus tardies. I really was asking how many people are tardy because they're avoiding the bus and then they get caught in the car traffic.
Well, a lot of the complaints are coming from the Toke section because that's our longest route. So they start at like 6:43 and they're on the bus for a while. So a lot of parents don't like that, which we try to accommodate as much as we can, but we're also dealing with construction or vehicles blocking or lawn trucks, every single day I'm calling the police department, like, can you call? Because, our buses are stuck. So I do have the ability to track all of that and I do that. Okay? Thank you.
Joanna? Sort of jumping off the idea of tardiness, sorry. I know this was an issue, at least at Tokenique last year, and I still have heard rumblings about it throughout the district. Sometimes the buses get to the elementary schools a little late, and then if a kid, for instance, has like a special, they might miss the special if it starts right at, the arrival time and they come a little late. Some of this, I feel like, happened when we eliminated morning recess and buses couldn't, maybe if they were dropping off in the second tier, they couldn't drop the kids off a little early for them to go out to morning recess. Now they have to wait until they can get off the bus, and then now they go to before they could go to the third tier. So I was wondering if there would be any sort of data on when buses or how many buses are getting to the schools after the official start of school, based on these sort of timing issues, like what I'm saying. And then just back to ridership, I was wondering if you had the ridership of the late buses at middle school. I know there's only 2.
We can pull that. Yeah.
Anything else on ridership? No? Okay. Wait, can you walk us through this magnet school slide? What are the implications of it? A little bit more detail.
Sure.
What other districts do, et cetera.
Sure. So we have about 15 students who are at magnet schools. There are, I believe, 3 locations. We don't have a large population that go to magnet schools. So for example, CGS, it would be a bus ride of 1, for example. We don't have the infrastructure or for a student to be able to do that. And so you would be looking at like a third-party provider, similar to what was used for out-of-district transportation for special ed in the past. And so for that, you're paying between $450 and probably $500 a day to transport a student.
Any questions on the magnet schools? Do most districts have a policy one way or the other?
So it depends. I mean, districts that have a lot of students going to one magnet school, they might provide transportation to that location. A lot of districts who might have, or similar to us, where they're only providing transportation to 1 or a couple of students, will typically do what we do, which is not provide transportation.
Okay.
You have a couple of school districts who, when they bring diverse students in, use that money to fund kids from the sending district to other magnet schools.
Okay. Any other questions on transportation?
John.
Sorry, thank you. This is sort of
what's part of transportation and not. I know 5 years ago, there was a consultant that examined the walk radius to school, or so the busing radius to school. And there were like a lot of options, and it was in the middle of COVID, and sort of just tabled it because it didn't seem to be, for many reasons. But I didn't, I was wondering if there's an appetite or an ability to look back at that. Or also along with that, examine some of the policies that we have, especially like with high school and middle school kids. They're not allowed to ride other buses, or if they're not technically, like if they're within the 2 mile radius, the 1.5 mile radius, but they could walk to a bus stop that they're not technically assigned to. The kids sometimes, sometimes they do it, sometimes the bus drivers can't get on. I'm just wondering if there's any discussions to be had over that, what availabilities or reasonableness, is 2 miles still reasonable? How effective is the bus 25 been? And how many of the students, actually Dennis asked this question because I just rewatched that movie, that are actually walking to go into the traffic and the oval question. So is there any way we can sort of reevaluate some of that information along with the policies?
I mean, I think we can always put it on the board agenda if that's what we're interested in. Do you want to touch first on some of what Joanna was speaking on before we pick that up?
Sure. I mean, changing the walk radius is really a question about where you want to put your money. So if like you want to reduce the walk radius, you're going to need more buses. And so it's just a matter of, is that where you want to invest your dollars when you have the budget coming up? I mean, I think one of the things that was talked about in the school bus logistics report was changing all the elementaries to a 9 o'clock tier. And I believe it was like might have been a 2 or a 3 bus ad. That's an option. In terms of bus 25, which was added, the ridership definitely is probably the lowest ridership of the 25 buses we have. It fluctuates depending on the season. The colder it is, the more kids we get on the bus. It's not as much fun to walk when it's cold in the winter as it is in the spring or the summer. But we probably have between, 20 and 25 kids, I think, on that bus 25 every year. Yeah.
Sorry, Danny, I can't hear that and we have to record it.
I said usually the afternoons are busier for bus 25, depending on the time of year,
Okay,
if it's cold or not.
thank you.
You could certainly piecemeal out certain aspects of this, like the walk radius or so on. I might recommend if you're going to look at all of this, do it all comprehensively and it's sort of planned out, as opposed to just taking the walk radius and looking, because then you've other variables to consider, so you might as well consider all of them at the one time.
I don't disagree with that. Sorry, I jumped in. If there's a savings to be had by having a bus depot, could that be offset by, could we use some of those savings to reduce the walk radius? Just trying to think in a more global, comprehensive way might be a good way to do this.
Katie?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think it would behoove us to look for some of those synergies. We have been having a lot of conversations, in terms also of, our start times as well, has been a conversation, and what would it look like to flip them? And I guess I'm curious, Rich, I know we've talked about this in the past, but can you remind me, the pieces that we're talking about and the cost associated, the timeline as we're thinking of all of these, a transportation study would be the next step. Is that right?
So if you were doing like start time analysis, for example, you would want to do a transportation study, and, they would look at more in depth at ridership. They would look at routes. What are your options? So, as an example, most districts won't flip the timing, in large part because they don't want elementary kids to wait at the bus, kindergartners to wait at the bus at like 6:45 in the morning, when it start, depending on the time of the year. And so when you look at the districts who have made that change with start time, Greenwich, which is now reversing their change in start time due to budget constraints, ended up adding a lot of buses because they started at the high school at 8:30. But they didn't want to have their kids, the youngest kids waiting at 6:45. New Canaan had to add a bunch of buses. Again, they looked at everything. There's really not a zero cost solution. And so typically that's why you'd want to bring in that consultant to say, would it make sense if all the elementary started at 9, for example, and maybe that changed the high school and the middle school to a different time, maybe not 8:30, but something, in between. I think that's what Wilton did many, many years ago when they were one of the first to change. The prohibitive cost is really that 8:30 time, which is what Greenwich did.
Can you just remind us what the ballpark would be to do that kind of comprehensive study?
You're probably looking at a cost of between $20,000 and $30,000.
20 and 30, okay. And is that typically something that we would put into a budget book?
Correct.
All right, any other questions on this topic? With that, thank you, Danny, for being here. Thank you, Rich, for
Thank
the
you, Danny.
work.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Rich.
for Terry for whatever. Appreciate the time.
Hello,
Technology.
Mr. McGuire, how are you?
I'm well. I'm right here already starting thinking this is your last instructional technology update that you get to see, Dr. Adley. And I'm going to make sure I send you all my future slide decks so that you can, give me feedback before the board gets to see it.
I look forward to that.
I'm going to find you. So technology has 4 primary roles in our school district: communication, administrative tasks, safety, and of course, to support teaching and learning. And if you're not sure who I am, or if you'll watch me from home, I'm Tim McGuire, the school district's instructional technology coordinator. And I'm here tonight to provide an update regarding some elements of technology related to instruction. Make that clicker work this time. Here we go. These 2 documents have been the guide and resources for my work here in the district. Tonight, I'll touch on elements of the Future Ready Technology Plan, including curriculum and instruction, budget and resources and data privacy. The strategic plan goals addressed tonight include expanding the professional capacity of our staff and improving technology to support teaching and learning. So I'm going to provide 4 updates primarily on these topics: artificial intelligence guidance for staff, updates on the K-8 smart device practices, as well as insight into the 912 plan for next year, utilization of data connected to software in our district, and a look forward to our work next year. All right, artificial intelligence, first big one. But we can talk about using AI or not using it. We can try to block it, ban it, or restrict it. But if you follow the news like I do, large amounts of money are being invested in AI. And even though AI, as we kind of know it right now, is around 2 years old, employers are currently expecting AI skills in hiring. So the 2024 Microsoft Work Trend Annual Report highlights this shift. And so in the workplace, the use of generative AI at work in the corporate world has doubled in the last 6 months, with 75% of knowledge workers now using AI at work. Nearly 80% of business leaders say they must adopt AI to stay competitive. 66% say they would not hire someone without AI skills. And 71% say they'd rather hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced candidate without. So AI is here. At the start of the school year, Holly Clark, who's a world-renowned expert on technology integration in schools, she led our convocation at the start of the school year with messaging on AI in schools. And Holly, to her credit, helped me shape over 15 professional learning sessions this year for our staff on AI that I offered and presented. But I'm not the only one providing training. Shout out to our high school librarians, Brooke and Maureen, as well as our assistant technology coordinator, Lori Ritvo, for offering their sessions. And I'm sure there's other staff that have offered department level sessions. We've also tried to support staff on AI understanding through our monthly district-wide technology newsletter, which is something we launched this year. And I have 10 staff around the district that have been collaborating on that, and a number of the contributions have been around AI. So that does sound like an impressive amount of professional learning. And I kind of think it is when I talk to some of my colleagues in my other district. I think we're doing a really good job. But I know a number of staff feel like they are underprepared for working with these tools. And I think that's probably because the area changes so rapidly. So one of the things accomplished here is a district technology council with input from administrators and teachers. We developed guidance for staff on the use of artificial intelligence tools. And within that guidance, they can use when they're working with their students. So guidance that they can share with their students. More information is currently available and posted on our website and was also distributed to all staff in that aforementioned newsletter. Our goals with the guidance are to, of course, enhance efficiency, but more importantly, educational outcomes, And it does, of course, again, emphasize responsible use of AI tools, encouraging the development of those technology skills that I mentioned that's so important out of the corporate world. Embracing the potential for AI to improve accessibility and personalization of learning materials. And of course, we want staff to use approved tools. They should also be reviewing AI-generated content, protecting our students' data, and continuing as they do to uphold academic integrity. So to help that, last year in my presentation this spring, I mentioned the build and the deployment of our school digital library for software, which has searchable and sortable information about software tools that are approved, as well as links to student data privacy agreements, so staff know what's available. Well, this year we've added a filter and a feature set so staff know what tools are approved that are related to AI. And as you kind of look closely at this, what I'll let you know is there's currently 16 third-party software tools that have been vetted for student data privacy. 10 of those 16 are restricted currently to staff only. But this is also a changing dynamic document. So for example, if I think about a product like Gemini, in August, Gemini wasn't even available for staff. By next August, this coming school year, it'll be available for our high school students. That's something that continues to be adopted and changed. Now, this slide, to me, is the most impressive slide, but we'll see what you think here in a moment. I don't know how many of you know who Sam Altman is. I'm looking around to see if I got this or no ideas, but see, he's the CEO of ChatGPT. And I found this post rather striking. I think it's important that I share this because we have a lot more to do with artificial intelligence and we have a lot more future work. So for anyone that has kind of any doubt, AI is here. AI is a very different kind of tool when compared to other tools. So I think of tools, sometimes I go right to a hammer or maybe a toaster. AI isn't like that at all. It responds to us using human language, and that really does change everything. So I don't really need to evaluate the work of the hammer or the toaster. I know if I've used a hammer, I've probably bent another nail. I know if I've used the toaster, I've probably burnt another piece of bread. But with AI, we can't just assume that it's working as intended. We have to really evaluate those outputs. We have to be clear of it. So depending on the tool that's being used and the prompt that's being used, AI can be very persuasive. This is something I don't think it's talked about quite as much with AI tools and people. One of the secrets to the persuasive power of AI is this ability to customize the argument for any individual user. So our relationship with AI is different when compared to other tools and requires experience or even a form of literacy. And this is a point of struggle right now because experts way smarter than me are still wrestling with what AI literacy looks like. There are some points of agreement. Tool fluency, which would be the idea of knowing how to prompt and evaluate those outputs. Really, I'm stressing that word evaluate tonight, those outputs. Ethical awareness on things such as privacy, bias, and misinformation, and process transparency, or being able to explain when and how it was used. So kind of looking a little bit at my high school students that are here tonight, recent research highlights that students without thoughtful AI experiences tend to trust the output unconditionally and often will end up using it to complete assignments without really engaging in that learning process. But students that have received intentional and critically taught AI experiences, which is what we really need to develop next, form of AI literacy, are more likely to see AI as a tool and not a substitute for thinking. Those students will make better decisions and critically evaluate AI's output rather than blindly accepting them. So I look forward to learning a lot more about the president's initiatives for schools regarding AI and how it's designed to help with that AI literacy. So there was a presidential executive order in April that he released that's really meant to help. And hopefully by the start of next school year, we'll have a better idea of what the guidance of that will be. Shifting topics a little bit. I provided information to the board early this year about personal smart devices, presentations in November and in January of this school year, as well as my presentation about a year ago, all contain kind of connected information. So as part of tonight's presentation and support of our goals around instruction, student privacy, and wellness, I'd like to provide a few additional updates on this topic. The KA implementation first. And just a reminder, you're looking at the slide and our practices. We would prefer that KA students just leave their personal devices at home, and we know that many of them do. But I've shared with some data before, so I thought I'd share some data again tonight. Last fall, we distributed a feedback survey, and this spring I did offer some focus groups for parents, staff, and middle school students. A handful of 7th and 8th grade students aside for a moment, they have different opinions. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The elementary schools did not record any device confiscations in April, which was the last month I looked closely at the data. The middle school averaged 1.7 per day in April, which compares to about 2.3 back in September. So confiscations have and continue to trend down over time. And if you consider there's about, 1,050 middle school students on any given day, your students at the middle school are 99% compliant. I do include a few other tidbits of data, but I really want to stress that high degree of compliance. So like when you're looking at these charts here, this is pulled from the entire data set from the whole school year. So the worst days tend to be Fridays, right? The most incidents tend to be grade 8. If you have a grade 8er, you know. Sixth grade students are more likely to be seen with smartwatches. But overall feedback from both the staff that I spoke with and parents I spoke with that they're happy with the change. And I mentioned some 7th and 8th grade students. They shared concerns on the protocol, and several mentioned that their parents are trying to reach them during the day. So parents should know that students at the middle school are allowed to access a phone to make urgent calls if necessary and guidance or the front office. But I just ask that they please help us to continue to support students by refraining from texting the child during the day.
I just want to comment and move on again. I'm so proud of this data, and particularly I'm proud of the kids, the staff, the community for a joint effort in this, because it's based on trust. And I just believe that if kids will rise to the expectation. Okay, maybe not again, but I'm just so pleased because there were people who were here commenting we couldn't do that. The kids wouldn't do that. The teachers wouldn't do that, and it wouldn't work. Now, tomorrow it might not work, but so far so good. So thank you.
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah, and again, thank you to the administrative staff and to the staff throughout the whole building, but also parents and students that do support it, which is the vast majority. Darien High School has been working on the topic of cell phones this year. Ellen Dunn and Keith Keeler, the assistant principals of the high school, have worked hard on this topic and are here to clarify any questions specific to their zone after I've completed the slide presentation. But I know, Ellen, you had to run from another thing to get here, so thank you. Thank you for being part of this. This chart is intended to outline the range of work that happened throughout the school year for the high school. After our board presentation in January, 2 subcommittees were formed to better address 3 core areas related to implementation that the original advisory council identified. So work around logistics included, but wasn't limited to, things such as evaluating product options like specialized lockers or pouches. They visited the Wilton's High School's pouch program, considering things like entrance and exit plans, as well as developing an initial pilot of pouches. And this work does overlap a little with the other committee that helped develop messaging that is heard and seen around DHS and rotated weekly. Parent communications, there were lessons offered to students in virtually every math class, as well as health and media classes, and an away for the day along with, again, that pouch pilot program. Building administrators, I know they shared draft protocols with student leadership and council groups and staff. They had focus groups for both. They also received input and suggestions from all those constituents. And communication has been ongoing. It's happened through things like the superintendent's messages, these meetings, and school and parent organization newsletters. This table outlines some of those subcommittee activities I just mentioned. The communication will continue, and we recognize that there may be, bumps, but we are all moving in the right direction, and we're all committed to supporting this plan, which we believe is in the best interest of our students. So I'll give you a moment to read this slide. But in short, access to cell phones within classrooms at Darien High School is already greatly restricted for all students. The new protocol is really intended to address the less structured parts of the student day, such as lunchroom and hallway transitions. I think there might be some misinformation about current practices in the protocol implementation, along with the exclusion of the seniors. A linked is a frequently asked questions document intended to help start to address some of that. I think Cassie may have made some copies if people want to, or not to. Okay, well, anybody wants the link in the link is in the document, so you'll be able to open it from there. All right, moving on for a moment, make sure he's got a chance to read it. No, you don't need to do anything else. It's fine. We'll let it go. All right, next section. I want to provide some data regarding utilization of digital resources by students in alignment with Goal 7A of our district strategic plan. And also it's an opportunity for me to use spreadsheets, which is my favorite thing. All right. So What are those highly utilized programs? I shared some information similar to you all about a year ago on this. So what are those highly utilized programs? The chart on the left on this slide represents the top 12 instructional tools for our kindergarten through grade 2 band. The right side is upper elementary, grade 3 through 5. This delineation makes sense from the point that how some programs are assigned. So for example, Seesaw and I Know It, those are primarily K2 programs, YXL is primarily grade 3 through 5. And when you're looking at some of these programs, I want to mention like IXL, there's several different sub-products of IXL. That's why it shows up on that chart more than once. When we look forward a little bit, the secondary level, as you look at this data, recognize again, this is counting user access. And if you're wondering how does this compare with last year's program access, actually, it's really pretty similar. Like if I really dive into it a little bit, things like BrainPop and Google Sites is a little higher. Some staff are definitely using a few products alternative from last year. So for example, Edpuzzle and GimKit are more favored this year as opposed to Quizlet and Kahoot was last year. The high school data is an accurate pointer, I believe, to what is in use. I'll have the high school students clarify me if they think I'm wrong on this one, but so far I think they're saying, yeah, maybe. But as mentioned last, we have data limitations in that BYOD environment. So we have some ability to track how some of that work is happening, but when I really dive into actual screen time for them, that's a little harder to do at the high school. And that takes me to this slide. So how long are students actually on devices related to schoolwork? I averaged the usage for a 1-week period of the top 12 programs. I chose April 20th to May 2nd for that. The dark blue is what the software reported as average. So you look at that dark blue, those are really those thin bands near the bottom. That's what the software is reporting. I almost thought it was too low, so I did seek some feedback like I did last year from some staff to help me clarify. We kind of feel that that little middle band is time on device not accounted for by software. Right, so the dark blue band with a little more time above that, but that light blue band is time where students are not on a district assigned device on an individual basis. So as the vast majority of a student's school day, they are not on a personal device or a student's assigned device. Please note that students in K4 do not have required digital homework. Some students in grade 5 and most secondary students do, and I think that's part of the reason why I see the time start to increase there, because this does capture time at home as well on homework on a district assigned device. A reference back to DHS, time's not reported here. That's partly because of the nature of the BYOD environment. I'm just not as confident in the time results. My conversations with staff have, and a few students from time to time have suggested that they feel that the time is similar to the middle school, but probably maybe even a little less time in the regular school day, but more time at home. And that was kind of my takeaway from those conversations. This is an important slide to me. Hopefully you'll find it as important in a moment. This year, Dr. Alicia Dodd and I read the Mediatrician's Guide. This book is a wealth of information for caregivers about technology use, and it provides clear, concrete action steps. There's a quote I found in the book that I think is important to share because I know it is related to conversations that are happening in our community. So from the book, the best software for protecting your children against harmful content is between your child's ears. The best hardware is your dining room table, where they can go online while remaining present in the family circle, and model, mentor, and monitor them well. Be present in their digital life and keep the lines of communication open. Dr. Rich, in his book, also references the same screen time guidance that I shared here about a year ago in this table. If you cannot set aside time for the whole book, please consider reading the last chapter on ages and stages. I share that with anybody looking, ages and stages. So with that said, I want to let parents know that this month we changed YouTube for Students to a default of full block on student-provided Chromebooks. Managing YouTube in the K-8 schools has not been a significant problem in classrooms, thanks to tools such as GoGuardian. This change is intended to help some families who struggle with YouTube at home on school-assigned devices or staff without easy access to those monitoring tools. All right. Staff at all levels will continue to have full access to YouTube for showing whole class video when it's appropriate for instruction to do so. Staff may assign individual YouTube videos to students through embedding tools such as Google Classroom or Edpuzzle, but students will be unable to directly browse YouTube at home on school devices. And I want to give Jeff Adams and his team a shout out for hours of ideas and testing of options. There's brainstorming behind the scene that it's hard to articulate here, but we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this and handle it in the least onerous way for staff, as well as a cost-effective approach. All right. No State of the Union or shareholders report is complete without addressing what's on the horizon. So in-district initiatives and outside forces do have an impact on our instructional technology landscape. I had a big section on artificial intelligence, and we've done a great deal of work, but this is a fast-moving field, and I anticipate more work next year, especially depending on guidance that's released by the state and or the federal from the president's executive order. The implementation of the EHS cell phone protocol puts us in front of anticipated legislative actions and is well thought out, but new practices come with challenges. It's something we're going to keep working on. Considering budget adjustments made this year, there are a few tool changes coming. We are switching to Securely from GoGuardian. The tools have the same purpose and similar functionality. This is a cost savings for the budget. K-8 staff will be offered training opportunities in August and September. They'll actually feel confident that once they look at it, they're like, oh, this feels pretty similar. We are reducing another program, Nearpod, to just a handful of licenses for those staff that use the product frequently. Everyone else will go to a free account. We're also eliminating paid Zoom accounts. Staff may continue to use a free version of Zoom or Google Teams or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet.
Tim, those are our kids up there. I'm
Oh,
assuming.
you want me to talk to the kids from? Oh, yes.
Well, I'm
So
assuming you chose
this
it
is,
for.
well, I don't know if I should give their last names, but one is a current high school student that's participating in an NHRL competition. She has, in this picture, just recently been defeated for the second time in the day. So her bot was, she was able to rebuild it in time to have it pass safety inspection, and she lost again. And she's talking to without giving away the student's identity, she's talking to somebody she knows really well, family member, shall I say, that is also a former DHS graduate that now works for NHRL. I believe he's a camera operator. So changes and challenges. And one of the things I appreciate so much is how the NHRL group has embraced us, and our high school coaches have done a fantastic job working with them. And in fact, I believe they're still getting ready for another competition in June. I don't know if they've passed safety muster yet. That's what's happening there. So yeah, I thought that was like here we go. What do I do next? And that's what I know she's thinking about now. What do I do next?
And NHRL is national.
Oh, the National Havoc Robotics League in Norwalk. So our robotics high school team participates and competes there. And I could actually spend an hour just talking about all the great stuff that's happening on that. So
I just want to know about the safety protocols.
oh my gosh. Yeah, they actually have a safety team, and they go in, and if your robot is not appropriate, they won't let you go in
It's
the
the
ring.
real deal.
Yeah, they're weaponized. They are weaponized. So, all right. So I have thrown a lot out there. I'm wanting to circle back and say tonight I hit you with a lot about artificial intelligence, an update on K-8 smart devices and insight into what's happening at the high school, what the utilization of resources look like software side, and also what I think are some of the upcoming challenges. So I'm hoping you have some questions or thoughts, and we'll take from there. And Ellen and Keith are also here to help address anything that is not in my wheelhouse.
Great. And I think we'll do questions by topic in the order
Sure.
in which you presented them. So let's start with questions about AI, please. Robin.
Thank you for the presentation. The question I had after reading the presentation was, what's next? What are you recommending? And specifically thinking about that feedback and the quote from Sam Altman about how AI itself is persuasive. So how are we training our students
Right. So
in a way that will enable them to really understand and use that?
there is a staff member at the high school I know that has started to do some really good instruction with its history students on that. And next year, when I anticipate Gemini being available for students, I think it's going to be it's going to be the right tool to start to introduce to students those conversations in classroom, how they can use it. And staff are also, as part of the guidance delivered to staff, is flexibility on how they approach AI with students, meaning they might decide that certain assignments are AI restricted. We don't use it for this, but they might have other assignments where they want students to use it maybe as an initial prompt partner or a thought partner to help them brainstorm a topic. Or alternatively, maybe they use it in a way to get feedback on some initial work. So there are a lot of potential uses in the classroom for AI. Specific to developing that digital literacy, there's kind of like we also talk about digital citizenship. I think this needs to be weaved in a little bit with a lot of those conversations. This is a lot to consider when we think about areas, not just how to use the tool, but also what might bias look like or what misinformation look like, and show them examples of that. At the younger levels, the experiences right now have been very much guardrailed. And so I don't know if it's appropriate for me to name particular products, but I already mentioned Gemini, so I'll also mention, there's one product I'm a really big fan of, especially at the upper elementary and middle school level, called School AI. And the teachers can give students that chat experience, but it's very well managed by the software. The teacher has full insight to what's happening, but also does a really good job of not leading or persuading the students in a particular direction, but actually prompting them to think about their responses. So with the range of tools out there, partly we also have to help students identify what tool makes sense for what purpose. So if I'm going to do a presentation, I might want to use a Google slide. If I want to create a chart, I might want to use a spreadsheet. Similarly, there's certain AI tools that are better for certain tasks. And that's something else we want to help them with.
Just a follow-up.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you just mentioned is excellent, but how are you training staff then to harness all of that knowledge and guide them appropriately?
So my training this year has been handled in a few different ways. Certainly, we're offering tips and tool suggestions through our newsletter. I have done one-to-one tutorials when requested with staff. I've also done a number of at least 15 offered sessions. So I'll go to school before or after, or also during some more professional learning days or team level meetings, and offer training. At the secondary level, it's been mostly coordinated through department chairs when I've done those workshops. So those are, so it's sort of, I guess, to try to answer your question here, sometimes I'm doing workshops with a particular subject group of teachers, like I did the math department or the social studies, or open sessions I offer, one-to-one. At this point, kind of whatever the staff has wanted, whenever I get a nibble, I just go chase it. So whatever they want, I've kind of gone after. As far as providing the experiences, I've also worked with a few teachers to help craft those individual experiences. So for example, I go back to School AI, I worked with one teacher at the elementary level on using it for, it's a writing brainstormer for some of her students. And then we use the same tool with special populations of students at high school as practice for job interview. So it would provide questions and responses to them in job interviews. So it kind of depends on the nature.
Scale, because you have got a great amount of knowledge, and it would be really nice to be able to incorporate.
So I'd like to ask that question a slightly different way, which is, at this point, that this technology adoption curve is moving faster than we are.
It is.
And at this point, you're talking about tactics that you're using to kind of do this, that, or the other. And certainly I can see that you have a strategic approach to it. But my question is, how are you putting some guardrails around creating a district-wide, system-wide approach to AI?
So we do have the guidance that I put on the staff website, and it covers a number of areas for staff as far as when they're considering using AI tools, what to look for. And within that is also reference to language they can use with students, as far as if they want to put it in like a course syllabus, or if they want to have a chart that they point to as far as when staff can use it. I'm leaning on that guidance. It's meant to be, it's meant to hopefully not need to be updated every 6 months. So it's not specific to individual tools. And that's why we also have the Learn platform to help staff know what's approved. And one of the things I wrestle with staff when I do the presentations with them, I will show, I'll start talking about tool and I say, well, this is true this week. So we always have to be flexible minded and know that these things are going to change and change rapidly.
How are we going to get to the point where we don't have teacher one in AI, baby level, and versus teacher two teaching the same course, same grade, AI advanced? How are we managing that? Not that I'm saying it's easy.
I think this is kind of a challenge beyond just AI in some ways. We want teachers to be able to customize the course for what makes sense for them and also for their students. So my role is really to try to, I think, help educate the staff on tools that may help them provide resources to students. And right now, some of my experiences with students have really, or with teachers, has really been about helping them try to find efficiencies in their work first, and then that'll bleed over hopefully more into their instructional side. So if I can help them say, hey, this is how you can, for example, translate this document really quickly, or change the reading level of this document really quickly. So they're making those customized materials. And once they start to realize how they can use it, that bridge will happen on its own. But for the staff that wanted me to come in to do direct lessons with their students, I've also been doing that.
Okay. Okay. There's a piece of the question that I'm asking, and I'll open it to the floor, that's really administrative in nature. So do you guys want to, because, I think a lot of your job is consultative and
Yes.
but there is that enforcement piece and that sort of structure piece is really you guys over there. So is there anything you would add?
I would add, as Tim indicated, there's work that needs to be done department-wide, so to be more systemic really through the department chairs. And just like when we think about, Tim, you would know what decade this was, but when digital citizenship came on the scene, it was like, how are we ever going to manage this? And like, this is just another layer. So really what we need to do is think about also how to embed within the curricula resources that are appropriate. And like Tim said, we have to do so we're not naming specific resources because they change so rapidly. Really also needs to be done through curriculum and also professional learning planning. The technology plan is, I think, almost at its final stage. So I think part of it is engaging staff and network to see what staff needs. I think you also need to think about readiness with regard to staff. You have some staff that are maybe more fearful and other staff that are very eager to jump in. So these are things that we really, I think, also need to explore with that tech committee. They'll help us find some of those answers.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Just going to build on what Amy said. I think this is a great conversation for the curriculum committee to be having because this is a much deeper, we can have a much deeper conversation at the subcommittee level. So I'm suggesting Amy and I work together to find a time in the fall to work on this because I would love to hear more in detail. And I'm envisioning, teachers from the different levels explaining how they're using it, questioning. And I actually would love to question Brenna and Ryan just to get your thoughts on how have you seen your AI use change over the past couple of years? How do you use it?
And don't incriminate yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just from like what I've heard from many of my teachers, I mean, going back to Miss Nelson's point about like AI becoming more persuasive, like what you write and how AI writes, they're both very different voices. It's very easy to tell, like, especially without human input, what's AI and what's written by a person. And I think with like in a year, that won't change too much. AI has programs where if you ask it to write like a person, it will say it's against my programming. It can't do that. And I'm not encouraging myself here. I've seen it around. I've seen it around. It's a thing on social media. But yeah.
Would you say that you used AI in most of your classes?
I've used school AI. And then if you ever search anything up on Google, Gemini instantly gives you an answer. There's no turning away from that. Those are the two I have the most experience with. But I think Gemini, it's a great tool. I think it would be very good in our school system, from my personal opinion, at least.
So I want to bounce off so that we'd be using the free version of Gemini next year, not the paid version. So high school graduates, if you're graduating this year, you can get the full version free from Google for a year for you.
So we've been building the capacity of the staff this year. That's the way I would put it, to be honest with you. High school right down to elementary school. That's where we started off the convocation at the start of the year. And through Tim and all his efforts and Dr. Fedigan, we've been literally trying to build capacity of people, learn from each other. It's been a year of that. There's competing forces here for professional development time, professional learning time. So it's not straightforward. I'm very proud of the staff actually of the leadership that they've exhibited in the classrooms and pedagogy wise and even in the elementary school level in terms of how some of the teachers have courageously taken some steps to use it. So I would say it's a capacity building thing. I think we reduced the budget from AI and took that out. So it's just important we continue to support our teachers, give them encouragement. They'll make some mistakes along the way, but we just haven't been cognizant of that. We've developed some policy around it. So with Tim's leadership, I think we're in a pretty good shape with it, and what the status of where we are right now.
Great. Katie, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, I just wanted to echo your comment about bringing this to curriculum. I think that it would be really helpful to have that facilitated with the department chairs and with Tim as well. I'd be particularly interested to see how teachers are incorporating this into their syllabus as well. And I'd also be interested to think ahead to how we are both looking at what universities are doing and also preparing our students for that. I can tell you that this past semester at NYU, I had a class that actually required the use of AI, just kind of recognizing that it's here
100%.
and there was a big responsibility component. One thing that we didn't talk about tonight, though, with AI that I think has become very topical and maybe an idealistic way of curbing inappropriate use is the very large environmental impact on it. And so I would love to see that be woven into the conversation as well, just in terms of actions and consequences, both in academic work and learning, but also in how we use our tools and the toll it takes on our environment.
Okay, anything else on AI? Pardon? Brenna.
That was my only commentary, really. The environmental impact, because we see like tremendous amounts of energy being pumped into its like facilitation. So I think what would be useful, or what I think I would appreciate seeing, is some sort of like, if we're establishing an AI literacy course or an AI literacy like phantom curriculum, then definitely talking about maybe distinguishing between like what is AI like actually necessary for in our lives, because I wholeheartedly believe that it's going to turn into another item in like our society that just uses tremendous amounts of energy. And so like if we're thinking about living climate consciously, then I think that that's definitely a message that I think we should pump out.
Thank you. Okay. Personal device policy. Questions about that? Joanna, then Katie.
So I know we had approved the pilot through a transfer. And I was wondering if we could have more financial information and just general information over how many bags that purchased, how many were used, how many more we need, what that's going to cost, what else, what we'll need to buy, like the opening and shutting, however that works.
So we have had late breaking news. It's not great late breaking, it's not horrendous, but this is their rationale with tariffs and different things. They have increased the price. So that 17,000 that potentially we will discuss later on for about 1,100 bags. I think that's about the right number.
1,100
will be around $26,000 thereabouts, as opposed to the 17th. So that's the latest information. That's what I'm going to have to sort of share at the board table this evening when we come to that particular number. But that's for those will be for the bags.
Were you more curious about what we've done so far?
Yeah, I mean, how much is each bag worth? How we're buying 1,100 more? How many did we buy before? What else do we need to purchase in order to have this be a successful program?
Well, we had 200, and we're looking for another 1,100 of the bags. I think 50 of them were lockable.
Yeah, we did 50. So of the 200 bags, 150 were locking type, and 50 were just a magnetically sealed type.
And which one are we going with?
Well, that's a decision that needs to be still made in all transparency. We've got, they're going to be given, the 9 through 11 are going to be given a bag, a pouch of some description, either lockable or not, and that's a final decision. I was hoping the decision would be made on that topic tonight, but that's still to be finalized. The high school principal can talk about it, but we're close to finalizing that. But the price will not extend beyond the $26,000.
And the locking or just the magnetic close cost the same?
No, there won't be any more than the 26. I think it'll be around 20 to 26. So we're asking for the 26.
So does it need? Well, maybe we can ask him. He's big proof tonight. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was just wondering, for some time we were told we didn't need bags, and we heard today, about how well middle school is working without bags, right? So I'm kind of confused why we're implementing bags with more mature students, that we should have better faith in following direction.
So the seniors, I don't want to get ahead of myself. The seniors will not have the bags, right? I think some of the feedback that the committee found out, and I would like other people to talk about this, but a wee bit of the students themselves found that they couldn't sort of behavioral wise manage the phone, and they understand the recommendation to actually have something to put it away. And also this particular bag doesn't allow them to access it through the actual material itself. The reality of the high school with that number of students is a wee bit of a different challenge.
Ellen, are you going to expand on that?
But
Yeah.
Lift my right over. I think the difference, it's a great question. I think the difference is that the amount of direct supervision at the middle school is pretty constant. I think developmentally, we have a lot more freedom for our students at the high school. And so they are not assigned all to a study hall. They have freedom around the building to move. They may be going to the library, they may be going to the cafeteria, they may be going to a learning connection space. At the middle school, they're coming in, they're locking things in a locker, and then they're coming back to that at the end of the day. So we feel that the visible reminder, the action of placing it in a bag, the bag that we're looking at is actually got the blocking technology that prevents the phone from linking to the MacBook or the computer. So I think the addition of the bag will really be a helpful step for the high school students.
So can we summarize so we can make sure we all understood what you just said? You said the differences are supervision, are the physical locker, and
I think the daily reminder of the commitment. I mean, there was a visit to Wilton High School where they're using the Yonder bag in back there. And one of the things that was expressed was how important the daily commitment coming through the building. I've got my phone in the bag, I'm showing my bag. This is not just something we're setting a rule and not engaging with. This is something that we're committing to as a school community. And they felt that the bag was essential to that.
okay, and when you
Students and faculty.
yeah,
and-
who's
and
they?
adults.
Yeah, students and faculty, the people who did the pilot, or was it beyond the folks who did the pilot? I'm sorry, I'm jumping in.
At Wilton, they've gone with the Yonder full across all grades.
Okay, Katie.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions and concerns still left around this. And I really would appreciate a more comprehensive document and visual that has these things together with the updated pricing, with the specifics on the bags, with the detail of what had been found. I'm also curious, what happens next year? After, like, are these bags reusable? Do the kids turn them in at the end of the year? What's their lifespan? What happens if they get ruined? Can the kids ruin them? We've all heard about the YouTube videos, how to crack a Yonder bag, how to get around those kinds of things. I do think that it's very hard for me to wrestle with this amount of money, especially outside of a budget. And in particular, a very quickly rising cost for something that's very unknown. And in particular, in terms of a priority, we don't have an issued device at the high school that greatly complicates things. So I don't need to have my phone out when I have my MacBook out. I can do whatever we want. And I think that we always, when we talk about technology at the high school, I think we need to recognize that our students are so much better at it than we are. Like, they are truly the ones that evolve and can teach us all of that. But I have implementation concerns. how are we going to make sure that those kids meet their buses? And, we have just hundreds and hundreds of them at the exact same time needing to have bags unlocked. Like, we were just having a whole conversation about transportation and timing and logistically, I think it's very, very tricky. I'd like to hear a bit more about some of the other schools like the Wilton trip and how it has been different, because in my mind, I'm also wrestling with John's point is that, if we have a policy, it's up to us to enforce it. And I read through the FAQ and, even high school students have said, like, if that's the policy, that's the policy. But like, what am I going to, I think they are nervous about getting to their buses, having emergency situations. And I'm a little concerned that we're not quite ready for this.
So I'll just talk to John's point and that point. One of the things that I think that this group is just finalizing is that sort of trust factor that we went on about a little bit with the middle school, where the bag may not even be locked, right? But it'll be a pouch where they can put the bag in and put it away. So you won't have it at the end of the day, potentially this locking, unlocking type thing. The locking is another scenario for where kids can, the next level of intervention is to have a locked bag if you're having it out or something. That's the final decision that committee is going to make. So I understand the wrestling on that. It's just different a wee bit at the high school. But at the same time, they are wrestling with that very same concept, in principle, that very same concept with the intermediate being it's an unlocked bag.
I understand that we're up against something of a timeline because the committee's been working. And so I'm curious, I think maybe this might be for you, Rich, if we were to ask for a little more information that's a little more formal or more formal at the next board meeting, do we still have time to issue the purchase order and get them to you guys in time for implementation so that we can have a more robust understanding of again, understanding that you guys are finalizing your process now?
So you just have to add something to the agenda on the 10th that would approve a transfer in the amount of whatever you pick. So it wouldn't accompany a financial report, but you could approve a transfer outside of the financial report.
Mm-hmm. So we can do that.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah. Okay. Sarah?
Can you talk a little bit about how you see this working, just to Katie's point about, the beginning of the day, the end of the day, just the mass of humanity that has to do this, and how do you envision this working?
Logistics are challenging, and that's what we've spent some time on. If we go with the locking bag, that adds a layer of logistics. The bags that we're looking at, part of the pilot that we ran, we discovered that the bag with a lock that they provided to us was not at the standard we'd like. It was locking in the bag overnight. And that would mean unlocking in the morning and unlocking at the end of the day, which is not acceptable to getting us in and out of school. So I think we're leaning toward the bag without the lock to eliminate that and to eliminate the unlocking at the end of the day as students are leaving. The schools who are using the bags with the locks, however, it's working because they put a lot of magnets around the building to do that. So at every door, we would have to have several stations and locks there for students. It doesn't take very long to open it. It's literally clicking it and keep going. So the visit that we went to at Wilton, they witnessed that all day long.
So I think
it's going pretty smoothly.
Thank you, Ellen. I think on the 10th, let's hear more detail about this proposed implementation and talk about the funding at that time. If folks have questions that they would like included as part of that presentation, let's throw them out. You can throw them out. Yeah.
I would just like more information on this senior area, what that is or isn't, and the education or messaging to seniors where it's, I could see a situation where senior thinks that they can use it at lunch and then suddenly they get it confiscated. And so the plans for that would be great to include in more detail, please.
Yes.
I have more questions. I was reading the frequently asked questions kind of thing, because specifically about, for instance, accessing the daily class schedule, since students will not have access to their phones. Is part of the implementation anticipating that there would be additional education to all students in executive function planning? Is there a calendar feed that could go from, to get their class schedule downloaded onto their computer that they could print out for the week? I mean, this kind of thing, because a lot of the students are using their phones just to know where and when they're going to have to go because the schedule changes every day. Are advisories also going to be included in that? Because a lot of students miss advisory because it's not necessarily accessible as easily. And so I have more of the logistical question for how the executive function training will happen. And that's not only 9 through 11, but also for the seniors who also will not be using their phones during the day, but they will need to know how to do that in college when they're on their own. And so I like the idea of no phones, but the executive functioning piece, I think, is really important for us to understand.
I guess what I would say is what I've said to a lot of our students in some of the meetings we've been having is that many of us went to high school without a phone and had a schedule and followed it without the telephone. And so partly this is retraining and giving them some other tools. We were talking about making miniature schedules to put on the back of IDs so they always have their school schedule because they need their IDs out as well to come through the building. But they, as everyone has said, they will have their computers in their classes. We'll be able to check often during the day when that comes out. So, we're weighing, it's a tool, right? It's a tool that's very helpful to us in many ways. And so those are the positive ways that our students are using phones. I think we all know that the negative impact may outweigh the organizational impact that it has. And so we have to try to find some balance for them.
So I know, I'm just going to cut off. Ellen, that's an important conversation. If there's follow-up on that, do you mind just sending it in? Because I just want to keep us moving. We still have a bit to get through tonight. So Dennis, just super quick question.
Similar, I don't know, similar, but did we give thought to the transition from high school to university, college, and the ability of not having, never had a phone and all of a sudden you have free access to unlimited phone?
Okay.
It is going to be a difficult.
Well, and that's why we built in the senior piece.
Okay.
They're not, the professors won't want them to have the phone out in class either, so.
Okay. All right. So thank you. We appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you'll put in for the 10th. We appreciate it greatly. Okay. Usage data. You're back up, Tim.
All right.
Questions about usage data? Nope. Thank you for including it. That's something the board is really interested in continuing to monitor. So we appreciate that it's here and we're excited to see it. Yes, Katie.
I'm just want to highlight again the fact that at the high school, we don't have a one-to-one. And that component is a bit of a black box for us. So I'm curious, and maybe this is really more something for coming back to next time, but I am curious to continue the conversation of how we are understanding our high school students' engagement with technology and whether how the phone plays into it and how the curriculum does and how, that you have like the entire world at your fingertips with no parameters. I do think that's an interesting conversation for us to continue in the future.
I think we can split that into parts. I think the relationship between the device and the phone would be great to understand on the 10th, and then the curriculum piece would be great to understand in the curriculum committee. Thanks. Okay. All right. Any questions on changes and challenges? No. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for your time, Tim. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you. I'll see you all.
Okay. First reading and discussion on proposed 26-27 school district calendar. Oh, no, discussion and possible action on proposed changes to 25-26 school district calendar.
So you should look at we'll pull up the colored version here. I think you probably have it in front of you. So for the 25-26 calendar, typically what we would do at this point is put in the PLC times and any other changes to the calendar. So this calendar is proposed to look at a couple of things. One, PLC times for the high school. Two, HHR move-in, because there are complex move-in phases, both at the start of the summer here a lesser degree this summer, but then also in December and also in April again. So we have to build in time. We've sat down with facilities, we've sat down with ONG, I've sat down with the principals, we've gone through all the room changes and everything else that needs to take place. And we need to provide our staff with time to actually make those particular moves. So you'll see that in there. And then you'll also see in here K-3 support for additional time for K-3 literacy to support the successful implementation of our new reading plan, so our new reading program. So I'll talk about just randomly a little bit just to start with here. I'll get it all on the table. If you would pull out your proposed school calendar for 25-26. I don't have to be in detail for this particular one, but where the yellow ones are, those are professional development days. One of those days, I'll just talk for the moving of HHR for the moment. One of those days will be for HHR actually moving. Because we don't know if we're even going to get in over the summer or even for the 18th. So we have to plan that this sort of year ahead. If you look at December, the orange, the 22nd, that will be a half day only for HHR, the 3 HHR schools. The staff have no time to change and get ready for the new phase of moving that takes place over the Christmas break. So there's literally no time for them to do that. So that gives them a half day there. And when you look at June 5th, the green June 5th, that gives them a 2-hour late arrival just to get ready for the kids coming in from the start of January. That same.
Not June,
January 5th.
January, what did I say?
June.
Pardon me. Yep. Same thing happens in April. April 10th is the Orangers as a half day. And then April 20th, that gives them 2 hours again whenever they come back. Okay, so that's the HHR moving schedule. It would be useful for everyone to know this in advance. Parents, particularly staff members, incoming superintendent, the ONG, everybody, right? It just would be helpful to do that. So I'm suggesting that we plan for those moves. The green boxes indicate the PLCs for the high school. That really hasn't changed other than we've moved it to Monday. So there's a thought that may be a better way to prepare for the week. That was originally in the PLC proposal for the start of the week, but it's the number of days hasn't changed because you don't have to worry about the number of days changing. Thereafter for K-3 reading. So the K-3 reading, if you want to implement a new program, our staff has said, and listen, I could probably fit, if I wanted to, fill this place with staff who support this. That's not the point, right? They, on their own, whenever I was working with them in the groups, asked for additional time. They're not wrong in that, right? So I think it's important that if you are going to implement a new program or anything substantial in the school system, it really needs about 40 hours of professional learning. If you do any of the research, any of the meta-analysis I've included in there, it takes about 40 hours of regular, ongoing professional learning time to actually fully implement something. If you want to try and mitigate the implementation dip, which you will see for a program, right? You'll see a wee drop in performance, particularly the first year. If you want to try and mitigate that a little bit, the continuous professional learning for staff will support that venture too. So in order to get those basically 40 hours or thereabouts, right, I'm suggesting that in addition to, we'll have one professional development day, the 25th in August will be all day, particularly for K-3 literacy. I'm suggesting that the PLC greens are a 2-hour late arrival for the complete district. Why the complete district? If you're going to give it for K-3 literacy, you can't have the elementary schools doing that, the high school on their schedule, and the middle school on a different schedule. So inherently here, the whole district would be on a 2-hour delay schedule. The middle school would predominantly work on MTSS and other discipline-based topics, but for the K-3 literacy program, you have to try and provide ongoing, regular professional development time for the staff. If the board doesn't want to do that, what would we do? We would pull the staff out. We would have a couple of days that we already have there. And we would do the best we can with it, clearly, right? But I'm just saying, if you're asking for a professional opinion on this, that's what I would suggest and support, and ask the board for the support of implementing to actually give this the time that it needs and deserves for the staff.
Okay. Katie. Thank you. I have a lot of questions about this. It seems to me that that there's zero question that we need professional learning, professional development, time for teachers to meet with one another and with administrators in order to roll out into reading. We spent a lot of time looking at our curriculum and the program, and absolutely, you're right, we heard that consistently. So I think that's without question, that we want it to be really successful, and we want to give our teachers the time they need to understand the resources, to get familiar with them, and to collaborate. However, this plan seems to me that we are taking something that is needed for 4 grades and applying it to 12 grades. And we cannot dismiss the fact that it is disruptive, that a 2-hour delay is disruptive to the entire community, to parents, to students, to workforce, that any day that is not a typical day is not just a loss of instructional time, but has impact on what the lesson is like. Is everything a little bit shorter? Are certain things getting missed? It's a pivot that we're requiring of everyone. So I don't think we can have this conversation without recognizing that it comes at a cost. I think it's really important to look at multiple options. Does it have to be a delayed opening? Can it be a early dismissal? Does that change anything? What about having a couple assemblies in the elementary school where some of our staff can take students into a convocation? I feel a little bit like this was a dismissed idea from budget season that got forced back in under the guise of something else.
Katie, listen, I'm not being disingenuous about this, okay? So that coming from that PLC suggestion, student on its own, fell on its own. This is my professional best judgment for you, for the staff, for the K-3. This is not trying to, it says in the memorandum, this is for this year only.
Well, so how does that work then? Because there is going to be a disconnect between, we're taking a curriculum right now and we scaled it back and we started with K-3. And the idea was that we would then look at 4-5. So next year, 4-5 is still sticking with teachers, college, units of study. I think the assumption was that we hope that this program works and that we want to have consistency through all 6 grades at the elementary school. So there is going to need a repeat of this as well. Not to mention that hopefully as well, that there will be some vertical alignment and we will have time for then our 5th grade teachers to meet with some of our 6th grade teachers and so on. We'll start to see over time a shift of our student body as they move up the grades. So I want to caution us about being myopic and looking at this as a 1 year only when curriculum just doesn't work that way. When we started this conversation, we talked about it not being one size fits all and not buying a box and plug and play, that we need time to develop it. And I'm a little worried that this professional development plan is a bit hasty and is not really thinking about the best usage of all the minutes for all parties.
Other comments? That's your hand? Okay, so.
I think, Katie, I hear what you're saying, but I think that and I understand that this is disruptive to some families, but this is, to me, that the benefits of this outweigh the disruption. It is my understanding from what we've all heard at the table from teachers that this is very much in need, and a strong need. So I am in support of this. I am curious why Monday versus Friday and why that shift. Just thinking people that work from home, there are more families that work from home Fridays versus Mondays that might make things easier. Was there a reasoning Monday versus Friday?
I think the basic reason was that the planning would take place at the start of the week and then be executed over the course of the week. But I'm sure that's not.
I'm just wondering if it would be an easier adjustment. The high school families have been used to Friday PLCs forever, right? So if the adjustment is just.
The only ones that would have to stay in that case would be April 20th and January 5.
Mm-hmm.
Because you wouldn't want everything on a different schedule.
Yeah.
This is on as a discussion and possible action, but I'm wondering if this is better as a first reading and discussion and possible
Yes,
action
please.
next time. So to that end, perhaps we could get a little more of comprehensive answer from the high school about what they were thinking about the Monday, just to understand their thinking. Oh, she's still here. I'm sorry. I saw Keith go out and I assumed that Ellen did too.
I didn't hear what you were asking.
I was asking about why you would like to move PLCs to Monday.
Well, I think 2 of the days were Mondays already.
Okay.
So I thought the Monday, Friday mix-up would probably be harder for people if we were doing Mondays or Fridays. When we think about professional learning and planning in the PLC, we were originally hoping to do every other week, and the beginning of the week planning for that makes more sense to be looking out than to be, by the time teachers get to the end of the week, Friday morning can be a tough time to be looking forward. Most people are looking forward to the next couple of days, right? And so I think Monday morning, when you're starting fresh, is just a better time for that limited time of professional learning. Obviously, children and families are a part of that decision too, so that was the thinking.
Okay. Robin and then Joanna.
I want to echo what Sarah's saying, because I do think as many parents are starting to go back more often to their workplace as opposed to being able to work from home. And I think Fridays most likely would be more likely to be working from home than Mondays. And it does create a lot of logistical challenges. That change of routine is for 2-parent working families, especially to have it on a Monday. The other question I had is the 2 calendars, we've got 25, 26, and then 26, 27. Are the instructional minutes for the year still meeting the state requirements for both years, even though we're adding these 10 kind of PLC days for the K through 8 that have not, or the late start?
Yeah, they will, because we already did all those calculations for the last proposal.
Okay.
And the last proposal was more than this.
Okay. And I mean, I understand the absolute need for professional development, and I know this is a fluid process. I do think that even with middle school, potentially getting a late start PD as well, being able to have best practice sharing with teachers and doing that effectively is something that I think we might be missing a little bit in our district. And so I do think that there is an opportunity to really gain value there, even if it is just for 1 year, but I appreciate the thought behind that.
So just for clarity, this for transportation doesn't cost us anything after long deliberations with First Student and Richard's efforts with them. We got to a point where they would do this without any compensation. However, I did receive a question as to does this affect the cafeteria sales? And it does. It's about, I think we calculated 24,000 in cafeteria sales because of
How much?
24,000 for breakfasts that the kids won't have. We still offer it for late arrival, but there's not as many that are taken.
The 24, I just heard a question over here. The 24 is for the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Joanne.
Joanne.
If I can just add one other point of consideration, we definitely have to think about a cost benefit analysis of this. We discussed this earlier, as was pointed out in the budget season. We would not even be remotely near the first school district to consider in the state of Connecticut to think of a model similar to this. The research does support that when you have professional learning, while there is a slight decrease in some of these instructional minutes, there is, through the collaboration opportunity, that teachers have some tightening of curriculum implementation and instructional strategies. And additionally, I think one of the other things I think that my colleague Shirley and I would agree on is this would also provide additional time for not only general education teachers across the grade level to have a systemic view of professional learning, but also general education teachers and special education teachers to collaborate. And one of the things that we heard from one of our special education staff members at the board table recently was in the alignment between interreading and what students will be receiving as intervention resources, whether it's through OTSS or special education. So this just provides another opportunity to do that.
The impetus for this, right? Whether it's done right, wrong, or otherwise, and there was a significant amount of time put into this by administrators and teachers, was really K-3 reading, HHR moving, and to a lesser degree, the PLC. That was just a given, right? Because that's already incorporated. So we wanted to put forward a comprehensive and good faith, put forward a calendar now that addresses all of those issues simultaneously. And that's not necessarily an easy task to do. I can tell you that there's a significant amount of time and effort went into that. It wasn't just cursory. Your whole administrative team was actually involved in this for a long period of time. Your staff has been involved in it. So anyway, it's before you for consideration.
Okay, Joanna?
I mean, I have to say, I agree with Katie that it does feel like a Trojan horse. So even if it isn't, it does feel like something come back around in a little bit different way than we said no during the budget season. Be that as it may, I was wondering what, you've had maybe about 4 months once you started seeing that this was coming down the pike, we would need more professional development. What other ideas did you come across and reject? Doesn't the PD for K-3 literacy need to be front loaded with the heaviest lift being in like August, September, October? And then by the time we get to May, is it really necessary to, April, May to continue to lose these hours of instruction? Also, I'm curious, what practices of professional development would we take teachers out of the classroom right now and put subs in? Are we still doing, or could we trade that off? So if we have teachers, and I don't know exactly what else there is, but like I'm thinking professional rounds, if you have teachers out of the classroom for that, for, a solid amount of time, if we are now, we're also adding on 20 hours of lost instructional minutes. I was wondering, where the balance comes from that as well. And just parents, PLCs work at the high school because high schoolers can get up, put themselves on the bus. Elementary kids can't. So, creativity would really have helped here.
If I could just add about front loading, of course we want to front load professional learning. I'm really happy that I was saying to Sarah before, actually, we have already received our version 3 materials. We thought we weren't going to receive them until staff was out for the summer vacation, but they're here. So we will be starting to front load actually this spring, beginning with June 2nd. The other pieces, and having implemented, I'll give an example with mathematics, not just English language arts, having implemented a new curricular resource in my previous district. Part of the strength is not just the front loading, but unpacking the units, like as you're getting ready to instruct and teach them. Some of that is responsive to what you see the students doing before you in real time. So in that case, you can't just only front load your professional learning. You really want, it's that ongoing professional learning is what the research should suggest, and I've seen play out to be the most beneficial. With regard to taking teachers out of class, there is a cost to that, and we do try to really not do that very often. I would suggest, and I think I've said before at this table, the only time that I think that there is great value in that is the instructional rounds example, and that's because teachers can see instructional strategies and practice happening in real time with kids right there. The only way to do that is when school is in session. Other than that, we should not be removing teachers from class, and that's why you would, if you had a schedule like this, you could organize your time throughout the year and not be pulling teachers again offline for when they should be with children.
Is there a budget savings because of that? Because we're not.
I have not done the budget analysis of that. I don't know, Marge, if you would have, or Rich, a better sense of substitute costs and savings.
No, if we're still, instructional rounds is really the only thing we're still
Yeah.
pulling for.
This year, instructional rounds, and we did, of course, pull staff for this K-3 study. And that, that took time. And the benefit of that, I think you've heard from every teacher, was not just exploration of a new resource, but the deep dive into developing a framework for best practices for literacy instruction, looking at the standards, really thinking about our own practice and shifts that we need to make, thinking about that preschool through grade 12, eventually articulation. Those are the benefits. We didn't have time, so we had to pull staff offline for that this year.
John, did you have a?
I mean, this is a requirement from the state to change the curriculum. A lot of time went into it. Seems like, again, education is not my background, but it seems like it's a pretty complex change in terms of the way we're going to be teaching kids. And this is a cost of that change. So, and I don't think it's fair to call it a Trojan horse, but I do think it's going to disrupt some folks, but that's the cost of what we're dealing with this change. So.
What, if we do take a multi-year view of it, understanding that we do want to potentially go up into the upper elementary grades, what were your thoughts when you thought multiple year? Again, I understand the driver is this year in particular, but if you look out based on your experience of other curricular implementations that have had to move through time, what do you think we're looking at?
I think the research would tell you that the implementation depth for an instructional program is particularly over the first year. So that's where the focus is, the front load. You're going to build the capacity of the fourth grade and the fifth grade by what they're doing and learning from their peers too. So I'm always an advocate. I won't say always an advocate for professional learning if you have enough of it, but I'm an advocate for providing our staff professional learning. If you look at international studies and so on and so forth, I think it would show that various countries around the world, right, one of the things they do is they support their staff through professional learning. And so I'd always be an advocate for professional learning. And to what degree it dissipates a little bit for a particular program after the first year, but it has to be ongoing. But not potentially to this level.
Okay. Amy, or Shirley, do you have anything to add in terms of taking that multi-year view?
And I think all of the teachers who participated were really clear that they're concerned if they don't have the proper level of professional intervention for learning, that they require that to really be effective in their implementation. And I think to Katie's point also, and to John's point, there is a loss, there is a cost. There's class times, children do miss that. At the same time, the notion is, in citing the research also, that increasing and opportunities for professional learning that really increase capacity and agency of teachers improve teaching and learning instruction. So in the long term, you've improved not only the implementation of the program, but the level of instruction kids are receiving and the breadth and depth of it. So I think there is a cost, and the cost is those extra days and the loss of class time, and especially on the secondary level also recognizing that. And it is a cost you pay for that kind of level of professional learning.
Thank you.
Just one other added benefit in this next school year. Shirley and I have just recently been able to acquire, obviously, as everyone knows, we're continuing with study structured literacy and thinking about how we grow staff capacity in that area. We've been able to develop a plan for our staff to be Orton Gillingham trained in this next year. So we have nearly 30 general education, special education staff members that will be trained beginning in this June. And so another benefit of this is when you can cross-pollinate, right? So when we're looking to grow the capacity of an entire elementary team, for example, in that type of training, the staff will benefit from those that have had the experience before them naturally just during these professional learning hours. So it's just an added consideration for the ongoing work.
Okay.
Katie. Thank you. I appreciate that we moved this to a first discussion, and I want to just bring this back to the comments at the beginning of this, because I think it's really important that we hone in on this. And it's not that I don't think there's anyone who's been paying attention to the path over the past 2 years of the change in curriculum doubts that there is significant need for professional development in order to change the program we're using. That is full stop. We absolutely need that. The issue is that this proposal is taking a need in 4 grades and applying a blanket schedule to an entire district. And there really, in my mind, has not been a comprehensive discussion about alternatives to this one model or plans for those remaining 9 grades. 9 grades. What is the value for those? What are the specific things? This would be an easier conversation for me if I had been able to see a comparison. We know that we need to have professional development in order to successfully implement interreading and support our teachers. We looked at, paying them outside of school days, and that would have meant X, whether it was cost prohibitive, whether it wasn't. We looked at that, right? Here's what it would look like if we did an early dismissal. Here's what it would. We're not seeing that. We're seeing one option and we're seeing a focus. And now it feels like the conversation has a little bit devolved into whether or not we need professional development for interreading. Spoiler alert, we do. The question is, what's the best way to implement that? And is this truly the only option we have?
Well, do you guys want to talk?
Questions.
Sorry. Didn't know you.
Yeah, it's okay.
If one was seeking an answer to that question, I wish I had an answer to that question. And I think, yes, you're right. In terms of sharing with the board, there were many considerations of different options. And to your point, Katie, also, what else could we look at? Could we look at precisely some of the examples you gave? Could teachers come after school or before school? Could teachers come at different times? And of course, things that get in the way are not only cost for that, but also availability. They have families to get home to, they have their kids to get on buses, they have that. So we did look at, but that's something that we may not have memorialized. But yes, we did look at other options. But I think we hear what you're saying is, are there other options we have considered? And we certainly can share that also. But a lot of it is moving staff around, whether it's before school, after school, which would be less disruptive to student attendance, was something that was really not feasible because of personal reasons and families and needs of all the staff. But we certainly can look and share with you other things that we had considered to look at. We love the idea of bringing staff in for other professional days and doing that before not. Availability, they have summer responsibilities, they have jobs, their kids are in camp. So we couldn't do that either. Looking at all the time you have between June and the last day of August was another thing that we certainly considered. So we were looking at a way that would be accessible to all faculty, especially in those grades, but we certainly could share that.
Right, so I think some of those are like cost limitations, but contractual limitations. I'm sure Marge would know more than any of us at the table about that. The other piece is, I just think that I could hear everything that you're saying, Katie, and I'm wondering, at some point there was a conversation around the table, and I don't know who here was here then, but around the high school, and why there was a commitment, to provide the professional learning PLC time at the high school and not with that's an interesting perspective to me. When we think about early intervention and strengthening from the earliest grades on up, it's interesting that the district started 9-12 and not inclusive of all grades. And there would be a natural benefit to the other grades. I think, as you mentioned before, we have to take a look at literacy continuum all the way through preschool through grade 12. That's something that we need to be working on. And we do always feel like there's a shortage of time. And even with the high school, I hear from Mrs. Dunn and colleagues at the high school that their time is chock full. They're so looking for more of it. So those are just some considerations.
Joanna?
And this might be more for something like the curriculum committee, but I don't believe we've ever actually had a presentation on the PLCs at the high school. Whether there's been surveys of teachers, if they're effective, what kind of things they study, what kind of changes might have been made coming out so we understand what they're really used for.
There was something a little
We
bit.
can add that there's one other thing I've mentioned too. There aren't even enough substitute teachers, I would say, in the world. It seems like these days for us to pull an entire grade level offline to have a consistent message and consistent professional learning experience. So one of the things that we hear from teachers over and over again is we'd like to get together as an entire first grade team. You can't do that when we're pulling teachers offline. There wouldn't be physically a way to do that.
Okay, so looking at the time, if there are additional questions that we would like answered for the 10th, please go ahead and send them in and we will take a vote on this next meeting.
I'll just note, this is your professional judgment of the people that work for us, right? Like, I just can't reiterate that enough in terms of this represents what they think would be helpful for this 1 year.
Thank you. Yes, Robin?
One clarifying question on the cost, Ellen, you had said it was a $24,000 cost because of breakfast, but don't the high school students already have these 10 PLC
Yeah,
days?
that
So
takes
I
that
don't-
into consideration.
Right? So that would be a zero cost versus what we have currently,
No,
Would have
correct?
been 27 or
No,
something.
so it's not really just breakfast, it's just food in general. So
Oh,
one of the
okay.
things that we see is anytime you have a delayed opening or an early dismissal, whether it's weather related or not, we typically see about a 20% decline in food sales across the district. And so the 24,000 that Dr. Adley mentioned is a 20% decline in the food sale for 10 days K-8, because we've already really built in the high school decline.
Even though they're not missing lunch?
Yeah, for whatever reason, they typically just buy less food that day. Whether they're buying less snacks or maybe they have more time to bring lunch from home because they're going in
I
later,
see.
whatever it is, we just do see a decline. in
Pancakes for breakfast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same question.
Okay. First, reading and discussion on the proposed 26-27 school district calendar. What do we need to know?
Not much. These are main, these are your main vacations, and I think we did put in the conference days, just put those in right now. But other than that, it's start of school, vacation times.
Okay. Are there any significant differences from how we're handled anything in the last couple of years?
No.
No. Pretty much just translated to the next year. Okay. Any questions? No. Okay, this comes back for another read. Or excuse me, it comes back for a vote next meeting. With that, I'll move on to discussion on April 25 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers.
So this is the financial report through April. We are forecasting a positive balance of 575,310. The general education RC is a positive 10,849, and the special education RC is a positive 564,461. Moving to salaries, salaries are forecasted at a positive 35,915. We have a small amount of salary savings across a couple of positions, some savings in turnover of building subs, and some clubs that didn't run, totaling 11,972. Moving to operating, operating is forecasted at a positive 254,505. We do have some savings in out-of-district tuition from some students returning and changes of placement for 281,000. And then we do have a projected deficit for the superintendent search for 27,000, which is a recommended transfer. Going to fixed is a positive $2,200. We have a small amount of savings in payroll taxes due to the salary savings and turnover, and then a credit for workers' compensation of 914. Moving forward to revenue, this is really what's driving the surplus. Total revenue is forecasted at a positive 282,545. Excess cost reimbursement is expected to exceed budget by 282,976. And again, that is due to the additional $40 million that the state has put into excess cost for the current year. And we're expecting that reimbursement to be received any day now. So there is one transfer we're recommending for approval, and that is for $27,000 for the superintendent search firm. We are recommending taking the funds from salary savings from a custodian position, some savings from clubs and councils from step and level savings and clubs not running, the building substitute savings that I mentioned earlier, as well as high school intramurals that are not running.
Okay. Any questions from the board about this? Okay, we did talk at the building, you're not the building committee, finance committee, because some of these dollars, we won't expend all 27,000 immediately. So how does that work?
Correct. So the contract does call for us to make a payment on execution. And so what ends up happening here is you'll have a reserve for encumbrance. And so this encumbrance will get carried over. It's not atypical for a district to carry over certain encumbrances for either goods that haven't been completely received or services that have started but have not been finished yet. And so this would be a case where we'll make payments across that encumbrance. So when we do that final year-end report in August, you'll see a number of encumbrances that are still open. This will be one of them. and then we'll make payments across that incumbents.
Questions about that? Okay. With that, may I have a motion to approve the April budget transfers? That's John, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Dave. Okay. Discussion and possible action on non-lapsing account, Rich?
Discussed it prior, I think committee, they were changing the law this year to allow for schools to account for Google and Florida education. Previously, under prior law, town board of finance or appropriate body had approved the creation and funding of a non-lapsing account. We talked in finance committee about what would be appropriate to use of fund of a non-lapsing account. Typically, it's something that would be considered a non-recurring expenditures or something like textbooks, technology equipment, studies, things like that. We also discussed potentially not having a non-lapsing account, and something that the district has done in previous years, which would be pre-purchasing certain expenditures. So we talked about having pre-purchase for cell phone lock beds that we just discussed earlier in the year, as well as Viewsonics that were reduced from the budget earlier this year.
I would just add, Rich, you gave an example of where a non-lapsing account is typically used around the use of technology purchases, not something. Could you just cover that a bit?
So as I mentioned, the best use of a non-lapsing account is expense that's not going to reoccur. Because by definition, the money that's going into a non-lapsing account is non-reoccurring source of revenue. And so some districts that have had a non-lapsing account for a number of years typically use it for the purchase of technology. And so one of the things that you typically see when budgets get tight, constrained, and boards of ed are looking for reductions in budgets to meet fiscal guidance or restraints, typically comes with technology purchases. And so you don't always have that replacement cycle that you put together and you'd ideally like to maintain. And so you end up with these peaks and valleys. And so districts will try to mitigate that by having funding for technology.
So during our discussion, I raised the idea of maybe talking about a creation of an account along these lines and this better subject matter over like the summer retreat, and then we can wrap everybody else involved in the budgeting process and explore whether or not this is a good budgeting tool that's responsible and meets the needs of technology breaking down on budget cycles, as we're probably going to talk about in a bit. So that's the way I wrap up the discussion.
Any additional comments? Yes, Joanna?
Oh, no, we just doing general discussion now.
Yes.
Okay. So for me, this is a little complicated because majority of our surplus right now is from excess cost reimbursement. There's special education dollars given to us directly from the state that we only have because the state funded us $40 million more, or funded the entire state $40 million more. So it's very hard for me to take that money and say, give it back to the town to put in a general fund. If I was in charge of the world, I would keep that money for special education, future costs, which we will have much of. I am willing to also admit that I am not a financial person with background in education. And I understand that, what Rich said about it being a non-lapsing account is really good, it's best for technology. So given this, I'm wondering if there's a way to, have a broader conversation, something what John alluded to before about technology in general. It seems to work against us often because it's in our operating budget. Could it be moved to our capital, or can we at least discuss other ways to come at technology year after year in a way that gives us breathing room in our operating budget? Because I don't think otherwise we will necessarily reach a real consensus on what to do with these dollars. I mean, there'll be a vote, but I think it will be, 8, 9 different philosophies of what we should be doing here.
Yeah, and I think it's probably actually in terms of timing, with a new superintendent coming in who will only work for about a week before the retreat, 'cause he's going to take a little vacation. Probably something that's fairly concrete like this is a more palatable topic, or an easier topic to manage. So I'm in agreement that I think this needs to be a broader discussion. I think we are in a period of time where we are going to continue to look at rising costs, and we are going to be also looking at the need to invest in the school system. But a non-lapsing account isn't necessarily the way to go about it. But I think we need to have that bigger discussion. So I'm very comfortable doing that in July. Yes, Katie?
Thank you. I'm glad with the direction this is going today. I would want to say that I think it could be really helpful to prepare for that we structure a facilitation of different components to it so that we can kind of weigh in and make sure that we have a constructive way of going through things. For example, anytime we're talking about, our budget, we're talking about so many things. We have a very large budget that encompasses a lot of things. And when we are in the budget season, we're prioritizing every dollar. When we find ourselves in a unique situation like this, we're constrained, and suddenly we might be making choices that are not at the top of our priority list. And, then to Joanna's point, which I fully agree with, the source of the money is also something that warrants consideration. So I would like to make sure that as we go into that conversation, that we have all 9 of us and administration have spent some time thinking about it and have been able to kind of share some of our considerations and points that we want to talk about so that we can sort of construct a very fruitful conversation on that.
Okay, I agree with that. Okay. All right, so I think for the moment, that conversation is tabled to the retreat. Okay. Technically, I could take a motion to table it, but I think
I think it's pretty clear.
it's pretty clear. Yeah. Okay, thank you all. Where is the,
Pardon?
No, go ahead, Jill.
you have the additional memo on the
Yes,
year-end
yes,
spending
for the-
request,
for the-
but you don't have it warned here.
We just rolled it into, well, I can't really go into the non-lapsing account. That's a different discussion.
You just want to punt it to June 10th?
Well, unless we just put it under we've just done the non-lapsing account, and maybe consider it under the other financial report, because that's kind of, that's where it was
It was
coming.
part of
It was part of the financial.
Sorry, we jumped ahead on the lapsing account, but we didn't finish the discussion
This
on
one?
the,
Okay,
The
surplus.
year-end spending.
okay.
So should we go there?
Yeah, go back.
Okay, go ahead. We'll get started.
There were a couple of options, 6 options outlined in one of the memos that Richard went over. And you've sort of seen that before. So off the 575, and I think 280 of that is above the budget, like that was like another 72.8 or something.
So the
Reimbursement.
280 is related to excess cost.
Right, so 280 is different than the excess cost, which we didn't budget for, right? That was over our budgeted item. All right, so we're looking at, the last time we were looking at the cell phone bags, I shared that potentially is up to 26,000. The Viewsonics, there's 30 Viewsonics that was deferred. We now have 11 of them that aren't working at all. So that's an urgency to replace those, we would say, as a one-time purchase. And the cost of the other 19 would be 95. If 11 of them have gone, I don't know what the forecast is for these 19. So we would suggest that we would put those 30 back in the high school and replace those now while we can.
Yeah, and just add, based on our discussion, some of the topics that were raised, we do have constraints in how we use surplus dollars. You don't go out and hire and create recurring costs out of surplus dollars. And I am in agreement that it's a fact that if monies came from a we had a reduced budget assumption around excess cost reimbursement. The state came through with special reimbursement on that. So I hear they're not coming directly from town people's dollars, but I think we should definitely focus on, the two categories: one, broken technology that we need to fix, and then in some of the items that are deferred. So I would support the 20, is it 30 Viewsonics being replaced. I wouldn't move, or I'm not ready to literally to go after the cell phone bags, and that's probably an updated discussion that we have at our next meeting.
Katie?
Thank you. I would really prefer that we were able to table the entirety of this conversation in order to be more thoughtful and to prioritize what we really need. The Viewsonics during budget season even came up as a somewhat, there were questions around the board table whether that was even the appropriate technology for us still to need. I personally would like to see a review of that in terms of whether it's still considered the best piece of equipment and if it's necessary for that high cost versus what we can do. Putting something like athletic uniform cycle just back to 3 years, again, is that even necessary? Are we able to do a 4-year cycle and be comfortable with that going forward? There are other costs that, are not listed in here. For example, this year and for the next year, we took out any revenue from food service and put that back into the operating budget, whereas previously that had been earmarked in order to be used towards a kitchen sustainability initiative. I'd like to see us consider maybe putting that money back. I think this is a short list of things, and it's very hard for me to spend special education reimbursement dollars on lower priority lists when we just faced a budget cycle where we had to cut personnel, and now we're scrambling to pick up things that are, some of these things on here are nice to have. I agree with Joanna, and if it were up to me, we would be holding this money to return back to our students in special education. So this list is particularly not exciting to me and not top of the priority list.
Dave? I think Dave has his hand up. Dave?
Thanks, Jill. Not to disagree with John about broken technology and the necessity there. Just for me, this issue that's come up previously. I think from a principled position, I think we ought to be returning whatever we have back to our good friends at Board of Finance and work together with them collaboratively in regular order to get things funded where they've always been supportive of us. So I'm not going to be supporting this for that reason. I think we should restore whatever we have left to the town.
In the spirit of full representation, I have not talked to every board member of the Board of Finance by any means. I have talked to the board chair. He would prefer that the monies be returned. I did ask whether an appropriation was an option, and that wasn't something he was interested in entertaining at this stage, based on his understanding of what we were thinking of funding. But that's just so that the full board has the understanding of the conversations that I've had. Yes, Sarah.
Thanks. And then building off of what Dave said, I have no problem kind of returning what was discussed, so that approximately $400,000. But I think whatever is in excess of that, I think we should be able to have the ability to do what we think is fine. I mean, I don't want to return all of the 575 when the town has already budgeted for the 400 that we're planning to return. My own personal opinion.
Rich, would you remind me of what exactly happened with this Viewsonic discussion? What have we done over the last couple of years?
So last year, the board approved stretching out the life cycle from 3 years to 4 years. And so last year, we were supposed to do, I think it was 40 Viewsonics, and we've reduced that to 30. for this year, which we replaced. And then there's supposed to be another 30 for fiscal 26, fiscal 27, and then fiscal 28. So we did do the 30 for this year. Next year, it's been cut. And so the following year in fiscal 27, if nothing changes, you'd see 60 as the need for replacement.
Rich, could you just repeat that last point? So fiscal 27.
So fiscal 27, you would have 60 Viewsonics budgeted on the normal replacement cycle because you'd have the 30 that were cut from this year plus the 30 that were anticipated for 27.
Just as a follow-up, when were those adopted? When did that, like you're mentioning that's part of the replacement cycle, but when were those chosen as the choice technology?
We've had Viewsonics for a number of years. I mean, they're the standard across pretty much every district in Fairfield County.
Personally, I'm wondering if it's not time for a review of that.
John?
So I just want to underscore what Sarah said, if we were to implement the 11 Viewsonics and 19 others, the dollars left would be 425,000, right in line with you signaled to the Board of Finance at their meeting when they assumed, without discussion with this board, that we'd be returning $430,000.
Can you speak a little louder, John? Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, are you talking about just the 11?
No. He, go ahead, John, say that again.
So when when we presented to the Board of Finance, the assumption was that there'd be a $425,000 surplus, actually a little larger, but they forgot to include the superintendent search that we needed to implement. So the net number was 420, as you indicated at the meeting, if I'm not mistaken. The assumption from the RTM was we were getting somewhere near 400,000 surplus handed back to the general fund. If you implement the spending for the 11 Viewsonics that are broken and we're using, if we want to review new technology, we can do that next budget cycle. And then 19 that might have problems in the future that were originally in the budget, but they were pushed, we still get to a $425,000 surplus that's returned back to the general fund. So
Sorry. This memo has 17,000 in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's wrong.
So would it still work if we bought the cell phone bags and just replaced theoretically the 11 Viewsonics? Is there, what's left after that?
So maybe because we have a moving piece now in terms of what the cell phone bags cost, we shouldn't make a motion in terms of using the surplus right now, or if you want to limit it to the 11 Viewsonics and kind of see where the moving pieces are. So I would like to make a motion that we use 55,000 of this surplus to replace the broken Viewsonics, and then the rest can be discussed in greater comprehension.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so the motion's on the
Question?
floor. Now we can ask questions.
Is there a possibility of purchasing the cell phone bags at a later time, but still having them usable at the beginning of the year?
All I can tell you is that the provider said the sooner than later for production wise and receiving them.
Well, what's the earliest?
You don't
we
want to
could-
start this at the end of it, like it's the October.
No. What's the earliest we could write a PO?
So the board would have to approve a transfer in the 26 budget before we could do a purchase order. So we typically don't do a financial report in the new year until September. So you would be doing a transfer in September and a purchase in September with delivery probably in October. You could do something, amend a budget if you wanted to prior to June 30th. And then we would issue a purchase order in July. The district did do something similar a couple of years ago when it restored a receptionist position here at central office. And so what we would bring is almost like a reconciliation of the 25 budget where you'd have your ins and your outs.
If you place the order then in July, would that be ready by the beginning of the school year?
I would imagine we would get the items. I don't know how much time, and I would have to defer to Ellen and Tim in terms of what they need to do logistically to get ready to implement, but I would imagine the bags would be here by August.
So we have a couple of different options. We have different mechanics, meaning whether it's a transfer in this year or it's a transfer in the following year. We can actually do that if we amend the budget. Going into next year is what you're saying. We would do that next meeting. We could amend, we can either transfer from fiscal year 26.
So you could transfer, so you can do a transfer in fiscal year 25 and pre-buy these items, drawing down
Right.
on the surplus.
Right.
You could choose to amend the 26 budget, but obviously not amend the appropriation. So the appropriation stays the appropriation, but you could amend where the line items are allocated. So if you chose to add $26,000 to high school teaching supplies for the cell phone bags, then take $26,000 out of something else. And that would almost be like a transfer before the budget got officially released.
Now, we bought some K-3 literacy stuff already, so technically we have some dollars
Right.
that could be allocated from
next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a motion. on
Okay,
the table.
so, all right, yeah, go ahead.
So even if we vote tonight, for instance, to use surplus for the 11 Viewsonics, would that still come to us in the version of a transfer next time around, or is this enough?
That would be the transfer.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Katie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I don't think we've had a full enough discussion on any of these items, and I would be most in favor of continuing this conversation at the next meeting.
Just having it in more fulsome. Okay. But do you think, are there more details you want in preparation for next meeting?
Yeah, I would like to see other options. You know, we had just a presentation today about the cell phone policies. We had a lot of questions about implementations. We don't even know which bag is being bought. So to be approving money for that seems.
No one.
Yeah, that's not on the table.
It's not on the table.
We're in agreement on that, but I hear you. You're wanting to think about it all in
Thank you.
context.
Yes, I'm talking about all of it. Like I'm not comfortable with the Viewsonics as they are, even if we're just talking about that. But like bigger picture, when I look at this memo, I don't. It doesn't make me feel that we have really like explored all the options of like what our best use of money is. Again, coming back to we have limited dollars. We have had to make very difficult choices to the point where we've cut personnel, and spending this way seems a little frivolous to me. And I think it warrants a longer discussion so that we know that every dollar we are spending is a choice that we stand behind. And I don't think I can do that tonight.
Okay. Dennis? did you-
Vote.
So I'm struggling with Robert's Rules of Order. So I would like to just, to Sarah's point, calculate 425, what's left, and then have the administration come back with discussions on how best to spend that money. Or is that
I
what
think
this
that's what this
is?
says.
But is it prioritized to Mrs. Loveland's point?
It is.
Number one is the top priority.
Yes.
It's the Viewsonics, and then I think the bags will probably handle in the next fiscal year, but
Right, there's currently a motion to vote.
there is, so I can call the motion, and then I just want to make sure people were finished.
Can you just
Sorry.
repeat the motion specifically again?
Motion to approve the expenditures from the fiscal year 25 forecasted surplus of $55,000 to replace 11 inoperable Viewsonics.
Yes.
Clarification. So that's only a component. If were this to pass, would there be continued discussion about remaining dollars at the next?
Yes. Yes, either way, there will be. Yes. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Yes, go ahead. That's okay.
Alan, would it be possible for us to have a presentation / discussion on Viewsonic technology at the next meeting?
Well, we can have someone come and speak to it. I mean, typically we've done that through the budget process. I'm not quite sure
what my issue is with
Yeah.
it? Sure. That's a fair point. So, I'm worried that we are spending a lot of money, to have redundant technology in our rooms. We talked during budget season about a current practice of teachers both having a desktop and a laptop. I know I raised that didn't seem to be keeping up in the modern world. So yes, teachers need laptops. Absolutely, they do. Well, computers, but I think one. And to me, it seems that if Viewsonic is almost another computer, whereas, speaking from someone who is, in higher education, I'm not seeing Viewsonics ever being used, right? We're seeing professors who bring their laptop and either use a projection or they hook into a monitor, right? That anything that's being run is being done from the laptop. So to me, I'm really worried that we have excessive waste in the terms of desktops, laptops, and Viewsonics. And I think that we might be able to streamline and really run our technology through a teacher laptop.
Yeah. So I'm a little worried about chicken and egg in terms of changing a technological strategy midstream, although I totally understand what you're saying. Can you remind us of where we are in the total Viewsonic cycle, Rich? Because if we're on a replacement cycle, are we doing this every year, or is this the end of a 4-year cycle?
So this would be year 2, if you did all 30.
This is year 2 of a 4-year cycle. Okay. Yes, Robin.
Just a clarification, Rich, I thought the Viewsonics were basically an interactive smart board, essentially.
Yep.
It's not a tool just for a teacher to do something off of a laptop. I think the reason we can't use just a static screen is because those were not.
So they're not, so like if you had a docking station where you plug the teacher's laptop and put it up on a screen, that's not interactive, and then you would just see anything that's on that teacher's laptop.
Which is why the other options did not work, and that's why the tech team chose these, correct? And they are still what other districts use in terms of operability and use of
They're widespread.
the useful life,
They're
et cetera.
widespread throughout Fairfield.
Okay.
But we're also applying that from K through 12, right? Yeah. So there's a big difference between, how a high school teacher is lecturing and presenting information versus a kindergarten teacher and student interactivity.
Well, I can say that they're being used, but that's neither here nor there in terms of, what does the board want to do in terms of framing this? Because there's a lot of potential doors being open, so it's kind of what to prepare.
What about? All right, let me call the vote on the motion that's on the table. All those in favor. That is John, Sarah, Robin, Joanna, Jill, and then all those opposed. That is Dennis, Katie, and Dave.
Yes.
Sorry, Dave, I'm assuming.
Yes.
I didn't mean to assume. Were you opposed?
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
It passes 5-3.
Passes straight 5-3. Okay, but we do need to clarify what we want to talk about next time. In terms of, do you want more information on the Viewsonics next time? Okay, so.
So it doesn't have to be next meeting, but.
Okay. 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 All right.
I think if other people have ideas about how to use the surplus, they should come armed with those ideas as well, or suggest that to the superintendent.
I listed a couple tonight.
Okay. All right, guys. It is, no, we're now on to, we have policies left to go.
So we had a policy subcommittee meeting a couple Tuesdays ago. These are basically new rules that came down from our council based on legislation and other changes. I haven't received any comments from anyone since that meeting, Marge. I don't know if you have or any further comments, but we did cover this in pretty good detail and expeditiously in the subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, that was the fastest meeting. That literally is the record of subcommittee meetings. Are there any questions about this set of policies? It's a first read. Okay. If people have questions, they're welcome to send them in. Without, I'll move on to the personnel report. Marge, anything?
No.
Okay. Follow-up action items. We have a couple of follow-up action items from this meeting. If you guys just mind sending them out so we can remember what they were. Thank you. Public comment.
Good evening. If anybody in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no raised hands at this time.
With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. John, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor?